let's look at Mars's transits first, and let's look at the transits of Saturn, Jupiter, and the nodes to see how all of these major players for you impacting your life in 2023. Reminder that Mars is in Taurus and continuing to retrograde until January 12th. And it will stay in Taurus, therefore, until March 2nd, when it then moves into Gemini. So Taurus for you, Aries, is the second sign. So Mars retrograde in your second sign of family, of speech, of finances, of resources, of value, of self-worth is obviously going to be an interesting time in reassessing and reworking all of those dynamics and really thinking long and hard about, your own self-worth and what you're worth in terms of finances as well, because the link between the second house in terms of family, finances, and self-worth is obvious when you think about it. Basically, your family instilled in you a sense of self-worth. They looked after you, ideally, they clothed you, they fed you, all second house. If you have that sense of feeling worthy, then you earn more. So you have more money, that's second house. But ultimately it's about self-worth, self-value, and what do you value? What have you valued your whole life? What has your family instilled in you in terms of values? What do you value personally yourself? So that's second house. And of course, that's a major theme in the beginning of the year for you, Aries. Then to flag this, Mars going into Cancer in May, June time is important because it's opposite Pluto. It's in a square to the nodes, which continue to transit your sign. So Rahu is still in Aries until October, end of October into November. So Aries, there's quite a lot of complexity here in the summer for you in terms of personal life, yourself personally, in your private life, your home life, your relationships are being impacted in a big way. And that's going to have a big impact on your work as well. All of those key focal points, the first, fourth, seventh, 10th, the four pillars of your life in many ways, where it's all happening, your sense of self, your home, your relationships, your career are really kind of coming to this sort of pivotal point now in the summer, Aries. So be really mindful of that, of the changes that have to occur and to allow them to occur and not to get too bogged down in, the details, I would say, but to make these changes or to allow these changes to happen. Mars gets into a much stronger position then in Leo, but it does oppose Saturn. So the opposition of Saturn and Mars is always a bit tense. And again, whether it's globally in a mundane sense or for you personally, Aries, we're all going to feel this. We're all going to feel this tension in the summer, June, August period. For you, Aries, is about the tension between something you want to do and having to get other people on board. And whether it's a group of people with Aries, Saturn is in your 11th sign. We'll look at that now in a minute, aspecting your sign. So its opposition to Mars and Leo is really going to get you to focus on working with people, thinking about other people and getting what you want through that negotiation, that kind of give and take. And it might be a bit tense in this period from June to August. And then it goes into Virgo from mid-August until beginning of October. And as it does so, we're approaching a period now into October that is quite complicated indeed. And that is when Mars, first of all, it goes into Libra. It conjoins the South Node and opposes Jupiter, Rahu, and Uranus all in your sign. And so this is where it's kind of coming to a head in terms of your relationship issues. This is where it's coming to a head globally in terms of the economic situation and a possible crash that I've been referring to. But in terms of for you personally, Aries, I would say be very mindful of how your relationships are panning out at this time. And try not to react too strongly and impulsively to what's going on in October and November. And again, because it's starting the year with this sort of reassessment of your financial situation, it could end the year in this major kind of fallout with someone around these issues, and especially around jointly held finances, I would say. So be really mindful of that, Aries. And then the year finishes out with, although Mars in a very strong position in Scorpio, Mars's other sign, it is your 8th sign. So it's again having to kind of work out these kind of joint financial issues. And then at the same time, Mars will be combust in its exact in November 18th. So in a very complicated area of your chart in the eighth house, Aries, I would be, again, remiss if I didn't mention this, because we're all feeling this in some way in terms of the economy and economic fallout by the end of the year, and many things that have to be worked out. But for you personally, you're going through it in such a personal way, in such an immediate way, that it's important to keep perspective at this time at the changes that are happening and the inevitable changes that must happen at this time. So in terms of generally with these bigger transits, I want to mention here Saturn, Jupiter, and Ketu, Rahu Ketu. And I've here highlighted certain houses that are particularly impacted in, I would say, a more positive way. You see here that the eighth house is impacted both by Saturn and Jupiter, the fifth house and the first house, your first house. The eighth house itself is impacted more so in the beginning of the year up until the end of April, because Jupiter and Saturn both aspect the eighth house. Again, joint finances, big changes happening in your life that you can manage more easily when you have both Saturn and Jupiter influencing this part of your life. After April, then Jupiter moves on and into your first sign. So then you don't just have Saturn influencing your first sign as you do from January to April. You have Saturn and Jupiter from April influencing your sign. This is a much more positive situation from April, therefore, for you Aries. But also, then you also have Saturn and Jupiter both influencing your fifth sign. So self-expression and creative self-expression and feeling good about yourself and what you're doing and what you're putting out there is going to be so much easier for you, Aries, after April, simply put. The other thing is that you're just going to feel better when you have the dual aspect of Saturn and Jupiter instead of just the aspect of Saturn from January to April. Because from that period, from January to April, with just Saturn aspecting your first sign from your 11th position, you're really going to have to look at yourself very closely and your objectives in life and your goals and ambitions. And your goals and ambitions might, really get you to focus on, well, what can I do? What am I able to achieve here? And it might challenge you initially in the beginning of the year, Aries. So just be mindful of that. But that period after April becomes easier for you to manage these plans. Your ambitions will be easier to manage because you'll have a new sense of what's possible, I would say, Aries, a new potential opportunities coming your way. And so it can be so much more positive after that period. The nodes, of course, are, though, transiting through your sign and opposite into November. This can be a bit complicated, of course, and it has been really for many months now. And so really what it's showing you is as an overemphasis on yourself and not enough on the other, or potentially a sort of counteracting that sort of impulse, whether consciously or not, then overemphasizing the other and not thinking enough of yourself. And so the nodes in the first seventh always create really tricky relationship dynamics, whether it's your rising sign, moon sign, whatever this is, does it need to get balance between the self and the other? And again, this is a global theme in terms of independence and codependence, in terms of interdependence more so, and how the nodes are really obscuring and exaggerating, distorting this whole dynamic for you, Aries. They do move then into November, and then the North Node moves into your 12th sign, finishing out the year, and the South Node into your 6th. Now, this is both positive and maybe more challenging in one way, because it's positive that the South Node moves into the 6th sign because it's really about clearing debts and overcoming problems into the end of the year and into 2024. But the North Node Rahu in your 12th sign can increase expense. So it could be that you're spending more and clearing your debts, which is a positive spin, but it could be that your expenses just get way out of hand and you just don't keep track of it. So that's something to be mindful of at the end of the year. Now, again, for you, Aries, rising sign, moon sign, whatever we're looking at here, if you're also in any of these cycles, Saturn, Jupiter, Rahu, or Ketu, they are going to be more relevant. The positions of those particular planets will be more relevant. along with Mars itself throughout being relevant because Mars is your ruler. So pay a particular attention to Mars and whatever planetary cycle you're experiencing. So I hope that's a bit of help, Aries. And as always, I wish you the very best for the year ahead for 2023. So Taurus, we'll start with your ruler, Venus, before we get into the slower moving Saturn, Jupiter, and the nodes. So Taurus, your ruler, is in Capricorn, starting out the year from 29th of December, tail end of 22, until January 22nd, 23. In Capricorn, it is conjunct Pluto. So the year begins with this Venus-Pluto conjunction, just as 2022 did. And it's doing so in your ninth sign. So in terms of travel plans, I would be very mindful of any kind of hidden dynamics going on there, or power struggles even that are going on with anybody, with anyone at all. Be mindful of travel and study. Those are the two main indications of the ninth house. If your father is still alive, the relationship with him as well would be a key focal point there. So focusing on your everyday routines as you're traveling, and maybe losing those routines might be one thing that happens, as is often the case. So that's something to be mindful of from the beginning of the year. But the other thing to note is that Mars continues to retrograde in your sign until the 12th of January and doesn't move out until the 2nd of March. So really until March, you're experiencing this dynamic of Mars and you're having to put up with Mars. Maybe it's like, Mars can be that kind of wasp or buzzy bee spinning around your head when you're like trying to enjoy a quiet period in the sun. Or it could be just that nuisance, that's something that's just not quite right, or that's, getting you to do something or challenging you in some way. This is some challenge here with Mars for you because it's your seventh and 12th Lord. It could be somebody else very directly coming into your space and challenging you to make some changes and some reassessment of the way you're doing things. But it could just as potentially be a subconscious thing because it's a 12th Lord, Mars. So it might not be directly experienced through another person. It might be this kind of niggly sense of something's not quite right, something's kind of a bit off, and I need to kind of figure out what that is. And this has been a process, of course, for many months with Mars, as you then enter the beginning of the year with this continued sort of process until it starts to station direct by mid-month, January, and then on into March as it moves on into your second sign. So that's something just to be mindful of from the beginning. Any frustrations, any impatience, any irritability, to kind of be really mindful of that. Because when you add in Venus conjunct Pluto on top of that, and Pluto, in modern day astrology ruling Scorpio, you might say, well, of course, that's some interesting dynamic that you've got going on there with in some sort of relationship dynamic. And again, especially in terms of learning, traveling, studying, all of these things. Venus then goes into Aquarius, 22nd to the 15th, 22nd of January to 15th of February. It then becomes exalted in Pisces. So this is a much better situation. In a way, this is a situation where globally we're going to see this sort of extreme start to kick in from mid-February until mid-March, where we don't just have Venus exalted, but Jupiter is with Venus exalted in Pisces. This is like a too much of a good thing, really, I would say. Now, for you personally, though, this could be a good thing because, of course, it is your 11th sign where Jupiter has been transiting in your 11th is a positive transit for sure. And your ruler Venus now coming in here exalted could feel really good indeed. And so this spring period is definitely a time to take full advantage of, Taurus, in terms of connecting with friends, being more sociable. All of those things are highlighted by the 11th sign. It then moves into Aries. Venus moves into Aries from mid-March until the beginning of April. It's a swift transit, thankfully, because the 12th sign is usually something where, you may be not quite clear about what you're doing, but that you need to do something, and because it's Aries. But, it might be more about doing something for other people more than anything else, thinking about others where, you might say, well, that's a Venusian kind of impulse anyway, but it's again tricky because it's Venus in the 12th in Aries, which is very much about what you want. And then it's also about having to think about what others want. So it's a bit tricky with Venus in Aries. But then it moves into your sign. So another sweet spot in the year in many ways from 6th of April to 2nd of May. Venus transiting through your sign, out of the way of the nodes, which is another complexity of March period, out of the way of Uranus, all of that activity going on in your 12th sign, now into your first sign. So April into May is certainly a sweet spot in the year for you to really take full advantage of. Then it goes into Gemini in May, again, another swift transit. And as soon as you hear the word swift, you know that there's a retrograde coming up. It means that the planet is getting too far ahead of the sun, and the inner planets, Venus and Mercury. When they do that, you know that they're getting too far ahead of themselves. You might be getting too far ahead of yourself, and then you therefore have to go into major review mode later on, which I'll show you in July. But in May, June, you're seeing this period here where it goes into Gemini. I actually missed out I'm just noticing this here. I missed out the Cancer transit here. So Cancer is here again from May 30th to July 6th. So what happens here is that May, June into July, we have this sort of you getting ahead of yourself, and it could be very enjoyable indeed. Nothing wrong with any of that. You do have the Cancer transit then opposing Pluto, so there's other tricky dynamics going on there in terms of travel. So think about that in June. But by July, you see here what's happening? I'll just highlight all of these. You have Venus, your ruler, go into Leo. Then it goes retrograde from July 30th, go back into Cancer in August until October 1st. So this is complicated. And because it's going back and over third and fourth houses, you know, there's something going on in the home situation, quite obviously, with Venus stationing in your fourth house. There's some home situation that has to be completely reassessed and reviewed and gone back over and back over again and again. And that's something to be really patient with in the summer, Taurus. And patient and how you communicate that and how you deal with other people, because it's doing it from the fourth back to the third, back to the fourth again. So you're really going to have to negotiate and communicate very effectively when you're dealing with these issues around the home. And then it stations in September, on September 4th, but it doesn't get out of Cancer and then until October 1st. So it's going to stay quite a while in Cancer because of that, moving in initially in June and not moving out until October. So be really mindful, I would say, about how you're communicating, about looking at what you want in any situation, what makes you happy, you know, whether it's a home situation or anything that you want. Think about how do you get what you want and how do you negotiate with that and how do you ask for that? How do you communicate that clearly? How do you clarify that for other people as well so that they're clear about what you want? By October, then it goes back into Leo, into November. Again, it's going back over recent territory. So this whole thing is going to be like a whole period, many months of working out something around the home situation, personal life, and all of that. And there's some challenge to work out because, of course, for you, Taurus, Venus also rules your sixth sign. So it's about working out the day-to-day stuff, working out some maybe problem, even that sixth house, maybe some financial issue, maybe some debt, maybe something has to be worked out, some issue in the home. Something has to be worked out in the months of the summer months into the autumn. And then after all of that, then we have a really complicated period coming up. So I would really flag this from the beginning of the year to be mindful of this end periods where there could be this kind of downturn because of something that has been worked out, hopefully at this stage in terms of your home situation. But that it could be this kind of fallout period now in November because Venus goes into Virgo in debilitation in November from the 2nd to the 29th. And before it's finished this transit, it conjoins Ketu by exact degree on the 28th of November, pretty much around the eclipse degree. So this is a real fallout, and this is your fifth sign. And so it could be whatever plans you're making for the future for yourself or for your children, if you have any, could be a bit confusing right now, and you might not have the energy even to kind of do anything about this because you've been dealing with so many issues here around the home situation that, again, if you have children running around at home, there could be some issue here you have to work out. Thinking about the future, again, of yours or theirs, there might be this period where you have to completely adjust everything. And again, globally, I'm saying this is a financial crash. For you personally, thinking about how you can manage your finances now and your children's, futures, all of that is important right now. And again, on the tail end of that period of working out something in the home, so you're going to have to work a lot out in 2023, Taurus. So really make full advantage of the exaltation in the beginning of the year, and then its transit in Taurus in the summer. So spring, summertime is the time to really take full advantage of and to sort of store up whatever resources that you can in that period in preparation for this downturn, I would say, by the autumn. Thankfully, it then goes into Libra pretty quickly. So on the 29th of November. So there's a major adjustment, but then into December, you have move into your sixth sign, Venus in Libra, and your sixth sign is a more positive situation. And then finally finishing the year out in Scorpio into the new year, which has its own complexities going on in relationship stuff and all of that. But at least, it's out of its debilitation. So a highly complicated tail end to 2023 for sure. Now let's focus on the areas that are really being impacted overall. Saturn is a key one. It's moving into your 10th house. This is important in terms of work or any actions that you're taking and the impact that this has on your spending in your home life and your relationships. These are the three key areas. And then and especially for the first few months until April, Jupiter also aspects the 7th house. So there's a great potential here for relationships for you, Taurus. Anytime you have Saturn and Jupiter both aspect a place in your chart, it shows the potential, the possibility, if you work hard at it, that you can make this thing happen. And so relationship is a potential here. After that, then there's more potential in terms of home life because Saturn and Jupiter both aspect your 4th house as Jupiter moves into your 12th house. So that's a more positive situation because then Jupiter and Saturn both influence your 12th house. So it might put this curve on spending as well, which would be helpful in terms of whatever's happening in your home life, because there might be some hidden expenses in terms of the home. So this could show some opportunity around the home situation as well from April. But again, just be highly mindful of that period by October, November, where there could be some sort of thing happening in your home or some expense that then leads to this kind of downturn. Again, financially, but again, in terms of for you looking at your future and your children's future and looking at the adjustments that have to be made at this point and the shakeups that have happened thus far. So Taurus, I hope that's been of help. As always, I wish you the very best. On now to Gemini. So Gemini, this is always a year of Mercury retrogrades. Every year you go through this 3 and sometimes 4 times a year. You're doing so in 2023. Mercury is going to start and end the year retrograde, and then you've got a couple others going on. So you've got 4 retrogrades really to deal with in 2023. But it's really part and parcel of what you're about, Gemini. You're always going through review and reassessment. And you're always doing so in terms of what makes you happy, because it's your 1st and 4th Lord. Depending on where it does that, it's doing it in the fire sign. So it's very much about your ambitions in life as well, what you want to do, what you want to go for, and your relationships in your 7th sign, starting and ending the year in your 7th sign. So very much about how am I communicating with other people and how effective is that and how can I maybe adjust that. So a major review beginning and ending the year and how you're relating to other people, but throughout the year then reconsidering and reviewing your goals in life and how you go about getting what you want and how you communicate what you want as well with other people. So first we start out with that retrograde from December. It's actually December 29th. Well, we'll leave it in Sagittarius from December 30th. It moves back into Sagittarius because it's retrograde from 29th until the 18th of January. So always a time to be mindful of, Gemini, Mercury retrogrades, and really reassessing what you want in life, what will make you happy. And again, in relationship, especially for this time in Sagittarius. It then goes into Capricorn, conjoins Pluto in February. And then there's other dynamics to deal with there, joint finances perhaps, or some unforeseen circumstances in February with the 8th house activation. And then into the 9th house by the end of February into March. And this is where it will join Saturn. So it first joins Pluto and then February, and then Saturn in March. Ninth sign, very much about looking at what gives your life meaning and purpose moving forward, thinking about these kind of higher minded things, you might say. And then it goes into debilitation. It's always a good time to be mindful of Mercury in Pisces for you, Gemini, in March. Now, thankfully, this is really brief. It's speeding ahead of the sun, thankfully. So it's only the last couple of weeks of March. Because you don't really want Mercury in Pisces for too long, because it might feel like, you might be overwhelmed, your mind might be frazzled, you might feel energetically wiped, if this is your rising sign especially. So despite the fact that Jupiter is here, which is a mitigating factor, it's definitely propping you up. Venus moves through here as well in Pisces. And so there's definitely a lot of mitigating factors, but I'd say you should be thankful that this is a very short transit, but just be mindful of it by the end of March. And then in April, we have another retrograde from the end of April as it moves into Aries, into your 11th sign. It goes retrograde from the 21st of April until May 15th, and therefore it will stay in Aries until June 7th. So it's a long transit of Mercury in Aries for you, Gemini. This is very much about reviewing your ambitions. And because it's involved with Rahu, Uranus, throughout this period, and Jupiter comes in after, you're really having to negotiate a lot of different things here and shakeups. There's a lot of shakeups going on in your ambitions and in dealing with any kind of groups. The groups themselves that you're dealing with might be going through their own shakeups and all their own upheavals. So for you to be mindful of that, especially throughout this March, April, May period, will help you negotiate the relationships and the dynamics here, because there's a lot of dynamics going on. It goes into Taurus then, into your 12th sign in June, a very brief transit again, as after it's finished its retrograde. So that's more helpful that it's brief, because the 12th sign itself is not very clear, perhaps, about what you're going through or what you're doing or where you're even going. But then it goes into your sign by the end of June into July. And so this is a more helpful situation here, where you're going to be able to really just kind of move ahead with things before it then goes into Cancer, your second sign, and plan things more around practical considerations and finances and so on, family issues. But then it goes into Leo and it again retrogrades, another fiery retrograde, this time from August 23rd to September 15th. And therefore it will stay in Leo until October. And so from July, end of July, August, September, to the beginning of October, you have Mercury in Leo. So this could be, where you're really having to think long and hard about how you communicate and how you engage with other people. And because of the whole shakeups that are going on in your relationships, and especially in friendships and groups of people, this will get you to really focus on you dealing with people in general, I would say, all year. I mean, I think it's a theme all year to be really mindful of. Then it goes into exaltation after it's finished its whole retrograde in September, moves on into October, goes into Virgo, a very strong position in October, thankfully. Now, this also helps mitigate the Venus situation in Virgo and in your home life and all of that. But it also, in a way, can, challenge you to make some adjustments here. And this is where the major adjustments have to come in anyway, because we're having an eclipse here in October. And then you have Mercury and then Venus both conjoined the South Node into November. So this is a bit complicated for sure. And then as it goes into Libra and then Scorpio, finishing out November in Scorpio, you're having to negotiate some things here for sure. But then Mercury goes retrograde again, because it's going to move into Sagittarius initially by the end of November, and then retrograde from mid-December until the 2nd of January 2024. So that means it's going to re-enter Scorpio from December 28th. And this is complicated. As it retrogrades and moves back into a sign it's already left, and as that sign is Scorpio, and the juncture between Scorpio and Sagittarius is really complicated, and as it's your 6th and 7th house, Gemini, I would be really mindful in this whole period from November, end of November into the beginning of 2024, January, of how you're engaging with other people. And because the year starts out with you reviewing your relationship, the year ending with you reviewing your relationship and going through some maybe even conflict at this point, it's important that you are patient with this, you are mindful of it, that you're mindful of other people and how you're engaging with other people, because it's a really complicated time. But if you manage this, I think, there's many things that you can improve in your life ultimately after this period. So let's get to the longer term transits now of Saturn, Jupiter, and the nodes. Saturn is in your ninth all year, moves in January. Ninth house is very much about what you believe to be true. Saturn is going to get you to question what is truth. What do you believe? You might question other people. You might question people who've guided you thus far, who've given you any advice, any teachers, anything traditional will be questioned. And it's important that you don't overdo that, of course, because you might doubt anything or anyone. You might get into some sort of situation with questioning some sort of traditional approach, and you might want to shake that up. At the same time, as Saturn then influences your 11th sign, where all the major shakeups are happening in terms of your ambitions and working with people and groups, this could really, be mindful of rubbing up people the wrong way, I would say, because it also impacts your third house and how you're communicating with other people. So if you say things or do things with other people, it's also impacting your sixth house. It could lead to some sort of strife. Now, Jupiter is also aspecting your sixth house up until April. So that sixth house activation is there strong. So dealing with problems and negotiating with other people, especially up until April, I think would be more helpful. After April, then Jupiter takes the eye off the sixth house. So it's just Saturn looking at your sixth house from your ninth house, aspecting your third and 11th. Just be mindful of how you're engaging with people, I would say. And I would say that is a main theme for you all year, Gemini. After that April period, then Jupiter and Saturn both influence the third and 11th. So I think it is just a more helpful time to communicate with people, groups of people, in a general sense. So I think that's more helpful. I think you're going to be able to deal with these issues. Though you're still dealing with the issues, you're going to be able to be more able to deal with them after April. The nodes continue in your 11th and 5th, so really looking at your higher ambitions and what maybe personal things you need to let go of, even something you might really enjoy doing in order for you to facilitate a big ambition of yours. That's a theme right through the year until October, November. After October, November, that kind of impulse leads to the changes that are upcoming by the end of the year into the new year in 2024, when you'll be changing a lot in your work and your home life and your work-life balance. A lot of changes that are going to happen subsequently, but which kind of bring themselves to the fore more by the end of the year, by November, especially with the transit of the nodes now in your fourth house and 10th house, and Venus and Mercury having moved through your fourth house, Virgo. There's going to be some changes going on in your home, and it's going to impact your work, or it might be work that impacts your home in terms of maybe you want to do some different kind of work that changes maybe even where you live. There could be even changes in where you live, or at least in how you live. Let me put it that way. So, Gemini, a lot of changes going on this year for you, as there are for everybody. But in terms of how you're communicating and engaging with other people and your ambitions and goals in life, and how you can overcome any problems or challenges to reach your goals, and to think about effectively communicating those with other people, is going to be a better scenario than kind of, bulldozing your way through here, because it's not going to work if you don't have other people on board. That's the key thing here with Saturn aspecting your 11th house. So try and get other people on board, I think, straight away, and you'll be able to communicate more effectively and get what you want in the end. So Gemini, I hope that's been of help. As always, I wish you the very best for the year ahead now, and moving on to the next sign, and that is Cancer. So Cancer, this is for Cancer rising and or moon sign. And Cancer, we can look at the lunar eclipses, and we look at, the transits, of course, as well, especially of Mars. We look at Saturn and Jupiter and the nodes and how they're impacting you. So the first thing to know is the lunar eclipses take place in May and October. They follow the solar eclipses 2 weeks prior. So this is a sort of kind of culmination point always with the lunar eclipse following the solar eclipse. And so for you, the partial lunar eclipse on May 5th at 20 degrees of Libra in your home environment, after having an eclipse in Aries in your 10th house of work, there could be some sort of resolution or a culmination point here in May in terms of changes that are now taking place in your home life, that have been taking place in your home life, of course, because the South Node Ketu has been moving through your fourth house. So there has to have been changes. But I think every time you have an eclipse in that area, it kind of brings it to the fore more. And it's almost maybe this sense of urgency to make a change, perhaps as well, that you might feel around this May period. And that could be a positive thing. Maybe it's a shakeup in the home. Maybe it's that clear out, even that's Ketu. It's good for clearing things out. This is a transit and influence that's going on all year until really October, November. So I would say a good clear out of your home is due. The next eclipse then occurs in the opposite sign, where we started the year with a solar eclipse in Aries. We finished the year with a lunar eclipse, the very last eclipse of 2023 in October 28th. And that's at 10 degrees of Aries. And so again, 10th sign, again, that's activated from the word go really, and has been with the North Node Rahu moving through your 10th sign, shaking things up, making changes in your work life, of course, showing necessary changes and surprising changes perhaps as well. Maybe even promotions, because of Rahu can really increase things. But this is a partial lunar eclipse, so it's a culmination point again after an eclipse in April. Now in October, this sort of coming around to a kind of resolution around some issues perhaps that started in April. It's a full moon partial lunar eclipse, so they always show this kind of resolution point, this ending point in many ways, wrapping something up in many ways. So by the end of October, there might be this sort of resolution in your work. You might have some sort of sense of what needs to be done at this point, and go ahead and do that, because it's not always necessarily the best time to actually do anything, during the eclipse window, especially. And just to remind you, actually, that the eclipse window is from April 20th until that May 5th period. And then later on from the October 14th to October 28th period. So those 2 week periods in April, May, and October, not necessarily the best time to be making decisions around your home and work life, more so about thinking about them and being open to changes. And then if changes are, happening, you can respond to those appropriately, as opposed to making more and more changes, because there already are changes going on. And I say this because most people during the eclipses feel a sense of urgency and feel they need to do something. And I would just ask yourself, do you really? And to wait on it somewhat. So other transits to mention is that Mars goes into Cancer. This is from 10th of May till 30th of June. This is its debilitation sign, but it's your sign, so it might give you a lot of energy despite it being weak. It is opposed Pluto. That's something to be mindful of in your relationships, because if you have all of a sudden a Mars energy coming in May, June, a lot of energy, but you don't really know where to put that energy, and Pluto is kind of opposing that energy. The other person might be opposing you, another person, whoever, your relationship, your partner, any other. That could build into a frustration and a really hot mess if you don't do something with it. So make sure that you find an energy, an outlet for this, an expression, a healthy expression, ideally, Cancer, in May, June. Saturn has moved into Aquarius really from the beginning of the year. So I'll talk about Saturn now in a minute, but it's a major shift because you've been dealing with Saturn in your 7th sign of relationships since January 2020. 3 years now of you having to really feel the pressure from another. Now, in your relationship, and I've heard this from many Cancerians, it can go one of two ways, and it usually goes one of two ways, and it's usually not left as it is. It cannot be left. Saturn forces things ultimately. And so I'm hearing from some Cancerians who are getting more serious in a relationship and maybe having to commit more. That's Saturn. But on the other side, I'm hearing of other Cancerians who are leaving relationships because Saturn either way forces your hand. It kind of brings a lot of pressure to bear. The fact now that Saturn is moving into your 8th house, Aquarius, at least takes the pressure off you, at least takes this kind of pressure from other people on you, off you. So it does put the pressure therefore then on, well, okay, this, if you, for example, did break up with somebody, then you look at the 8th house and it's like, how do we divide up our stuff? That's 8th house. On the other hand, if you strengthen your bonds with the other person, now it's about, well, what is our stuff? What do we hold jointly? Let's look at our joint resources, for example, our joint finances. It's really more about joint values more than anything else, 8th house, and our, the things we hold dear together, 8th house. But it also plays out in these kind of more obvious ways in terms of joint finances and all of that. But it's also about intimacy. So Saturn in the 8th house can also show maybe a lack of intimacy. Like, for example, in more obvious one, where if a couple have broken up, well, obviously that's breaking up and then dividing up their stuff and then, not feeling that intimate with that person, obviously. But on the other side of things, even when people get stronger bonds, it's now probably then, therefore, more about healthy intimacy, like a healthy boundary, like knowing where I end and you begin. That's an important lesson anyway for Cancer, and it's a tricky one for them because Saturn rules the 7th and 8th house anyway. But now that Saturn is moving from the 7th to the 8th house, will be a bigger topic for consideration for the next few years. So thinking about your boundaries, Cancer, is a key thing. Jupiter, I'll talk more about it now and what it impacts, but it's leading Aries, which has been aspecting your sign and it will continue to till April, and that's a very positive transit also. And so especially positive in terms of your children, if you have any children, maybe you've had a child, or maybe you're thinking about being more creative or something. Maybe you've been thinking about that, and until April, that's continuing. The fact that Saturn is moving into Aquarius means that you can actually really focus on more creativity because Saturn and Jupiter both will aspect your 5th sign. So continuing that sort of creative streak, but now I'm working on it and making it and focusing it and actualizing it, making it happen. In terms of if you have children, it's a double transit of Jupiter, Saturn. So it's a positive thing ultimately, but it's just being mindful of maybe having, again, that healthy boundary is a key issue with Saturn in the 8th house. And that's an ongoing transit throughout the year. Going back to Saturn in your 8th house, it also aspects your 10th house, where Jupiter after April will also aspect. So that's a great potential, again, work-wise. It's like Jupiter, again, bringing opportunities in work, Saturn's aspect, getting you to, after the many shakeups that have happened and will continue to happen throughout 23, Saturn's aspect can make you kind of more, objective about it and get you to step back and say, well, actually, what do I want to do here? Is this appropriate for me to do? Again, the theme for you, Cancer, in 23 is healthy boundaries because of Saturn especially, but also Jupiter's aspect. Saturn also aspects your 2nd sign. So as it's in your 8th sign, in your 2nd sign, aspecting your 2nd sign, it's going to really get you to focus on finances, of course. But again, depending on the dynamics involved in your relationship, whether that's furthering, your relationship getting more serious or moving away from a partner situation, you're going to really have to look at your finances, obviously. And your children, all of that are going to be key for you to look at in more serious ways now. Jupiter then, as I said, until April, it will impact, you very personally in a very profound way, I would imagine, has been. And in terms of, children, all of that would have been really a positive thing. As it moves into your 10th sign, again, more opportunity work-wise, but it's really going to get you to focus more on finances and building that for you and working and all of that. And thinking about what makes you happy, your own happiness and your own work life will be more the focus with Jupiter after April. And again, what they both have in common then is work, work, work. So thinking about work in general, but also grabbing opportunities as they come your way, if it's appropriate. A much more positive transit work-wise, I would say, from April. The nodes then, they're continuing to move through your work and home life. So it is shaking things up right through the year until end of October or November. So really you're having to really shake things up, really from the word go, but especially from April then. And keep an eye open, keep your ears open for more opportunities that you just cannot expect at this point. Be open to the unexpected, I would say, in your work, and open to then opportunities that come along and you can jump on. After November, then it goes into your 9th and 3rd. So really focusing on 9th and 3rd is a bit more complicated with the nodes, especially the North Node in the 9th, because it's very much about changing what you believe is possible after having taken the action that you've taken thus far. If you, for example, take an opportunity, a job opportunity, or if you've already taken one and it's, presented itself in whatever way, then the North Node moves into your 9th sign, and it's really about you looking at, well, actually, what is purposeful and meaningful to me in my life? I'm just going along with this change that's going on in my work life and in my home, but really, what is it that I feel meaningful and to me? And that's the 9th house. And Rahu, the North Node in the 9th, can really get you to question things and whether it is or not. And I'm not saying whether it is or not, I'm just saying it will get you to really focus on this. 9th house is also about travel and more meaningful pursuits, including, but not limited to, study, higher-minded things, 9th house. And then as the 9th house is activated with the North Node, Ketu, the South Node, in your 3rd house is very much about changing up how you communicate what you believe is possible. Because if you communicate whatever you communicate to yourself day in, day out, that's what you believe. And so the 3rd house being activated now with the transit of Ketu, and later on in October, November with Mercury and then Venus conjoined Ketu, it's really getting you to focus on, well, actually, maybe I need to change this whole thing up. Maybe I need to start thinking differently about things and communicating differently. And maybe, it's all chicken and egg stuff, right? But maybe if I communicate differently, I will start changing the way I see things, and my beliefs will start changing, and I'll start seeing more possibilities that I didn't see before. So when you think about all of this together, Cancer, it's very much about seeing the potential, and the potential is just being open to new possibilities itself will open a doorway or doorways for you that you haven't seen thus far. And to stay open-minded about things with all the changes that are happening for you in your home and your work life, and how that can really bring so much more potential opportunity for you moving forward. So Cancer, I hope that's been of help. As always, I wish you the very best for the year ahead now. And moving on to the next sign now, and that is Leo. So for Leo rising or moon sign, or any sign from the perspective of Leo, we'll look at the eclipses, of course. It's always important to keep an eye on the solar eclipses for you as you're ruled by the sun. We'll look at the sun's transits, and we'll look at the key transits of Saturn. A key transit this year will be Saturn, as well as Jupiter and the nodes. So first of all, the eclipses, there is a total solar eclipse on April 20th at 5 degrees of Aries. And this is impacting your 9th house, Aries. And the transit of the North Node Rahu, which is causing this eclipse, continues until October, November, and aspects your sign. So it's very much about thinking about what you believe is possible, what you believe, full stop, because the 9th house is very much about your beliefs. And Rahu here tends to shake those up and challenges you perhaps to change your perspective on what you believe, and thus change how you communicate, because Ketu, the South Node, is in your 3rd house. So thinking about how you communicate, whether it's to yourself or to other people, Ketu in the 3rd is very much about really addressing that, I would say, and perhaps removing some unhealthy or unhelpful ways of communicating, and that then having that impact on what you believe is true at all, or what is possible. Because what is possible in 2023 is a great many things and new things coming in. Because as soon as Jupiter moves into Aries and conjoins Rahu and the eclipse and all of that in your ninth sign, it's a much more positive situation. There's a lot more opportunity here for you, Leo, in 23, either for travel and or study. It could also be both combined, or any study at all, but higher studies would be more relevant here. Higher studies in terms of higher education or higher minded studies and more meaningful pursuits. Travel as well, of course, is a typical ninth house signification. So this is all going to have a great impact on you because it then influences your sign. Now, Rahu is already influencing your sign, so it's maybe showing some pressure as well to change. But then as soon as Jupiter moves into Aries and influences your sign and ninth sign, again, that travel opportunity coming along or a study opportunity, whatever, getting you to see something differently. And the one way you can see things differently, an easy way to do that is travel. Like, as they say, travel broadens the mind, but study might be, like I said, another way. So great potential here in 23 for you, Leo, to really change your views on things. So the eclipse in April is in a way instigating that, because this is an eclipse in your ninth sign right before Jupiter moves into your ninth sign. So I would say in April that things can really start looking up for you. It's not to say that they haven't been, but haven't been shook up as well for you right now. But in terms of looking at more positive opportunities from April onwards, I think that's highly relevant. Really, until then, with Jupiter in your eighth house, it's more about perhaps healing many things that need to heal. It's very much about thinking about more spiritual pursuits, you might say. But really, what that means is, thinking about things that aren't necessarily very tangible. I mean, the fourth house is certainly about home, and that is very tangible, and happiness, and that is certainly tangible. But in terms of spiritual pursuits in the eighth house, it's very much about healing traumas, for example. It's healing something that you, by doing so, can think more positively. And I think that's the journey you're on, really, the beginning of the year. The next eclipse, then, a solar eclipse, it's an annular, almost total, is in Virgo, even though the South Node is still in Libra until the end of October. We have an eclipse in Virgo in your second sign on October 14th. So this is where by the end of October into November, we're having, of course, the node move, and then we have Venus join it and then conjoin it by exact degree in this sign. So financially, there's a major shakeup going on in the world, but for you personally, Leo, you're going to feel this very personally in terms of your resources. Now, that could be a good thing. It could be that something's revealed to you that you didn't realize was there. The fact that, Jupiter has been transiting your eighth house, it could be that there's some inheritance due, for example, maybe more so if you're in a Jupiter cycle, perhaps. But certainly Jupiter in the eighth house Pisces can show that. But then Jupiter moves on and no longer aspects this. So you're then looking at major financial shakeup going on in your life as the nodes then move into your second and eighth houses. So thinking about that, thinking about the eclipse then in October in your second sign, and subsequent eclipses happening in your second and eighth sign, with the nodes moving in here by the end of the year, I do think that there's a lot of financial changes going on. Now, again, that doesn't mean in any way negatively. It just means that you have to evolve, in terms of your finances. So we look more about these transits in a minute. I want to just show you the sun's transit, because a lot of people who don't follow the sidereal zodiac might not even be aware of this, but the sun actually changes signs mid-month in the sidereal zodiac. So this isn't tied to the solstices and equinoxes. This is to do with the actual star signs, the constellations. And so we see here that the sun moves into Aries every year around the 13th, 14th, depending where you are on the planet, of April until May 13th. This is always, every year, a really positive time for you because the sun is exalted. So for you, Leo, April, May time is a good time. This time is more complicated because of the eclipse, for sure, because your sun is eclipsed, right? Your ruler is eclipsed in the ninth sign. So it's just that if you were to think about this more in terms of practically like traveling, be very open to, unexpected changes, opportunity as well, like I said, because then after this, or during this period of the sun in Aries, Jupiter moves in from the 21st of April. So again, just be open and keep an open mind about what is possible, because there are a lot of things that are possible that you can't see right now. And that's really, I suppose, what the eclipses are all about. You can't see it, but then all of a sudden it's presented to you and it's like, oh, okay, there you go. So that's Aries. Sun then moves into Taurus mid-May to mid-June, Gemini mid-June to mid-July, and so on. Cancer mid-July to mid-August. We're heading into a summer of really highly complex situations going on financially, with the sun moving into your sign. Always a good transit, of course, from August 16th to September 15th. But this time we have the complexity of a Venus retrograde. So Venus retrogrades in your sign, and that can be quite a complicated time, because Venus retrogrades from July 23rd until September 4th. So during this whole period, and this dance between Venus and the sun, always, as Venus gets way too far ahead of the sun, and then it kind of gets snapped back and then moves back, as does Mercury. Venus in your first sign moving back to your 12th sign, Cancer, then moving back into your first sign, Leo, throughout the whole summer months, July, August, September. That is a major readjustment in terms of your work life, because Venus rules your third sign and 10th sign. It's very much about, for you, Venus, always, wanting to do something, loving to do something, going for something, achieving something, getting that hit. But as it's retrograde in your sign, going back into your 12th sign in the summer, and in July, especially end of July, remember, into September, think about that in terms of, maybe not getting your way always, maybe it's not panning out exactly as you wanted it to. You're not maybe clear about what you're doing always, especially as it goes back into Cancer, because Cancer is your 12th sign. And so, thinking about what you're, doing anyway, whatever it is you're doing, and especially in your work, but anything you're doing, I would say anything you're doing at all, thinking about how you're communicating, again, combined with the North Node in your ninth and the South Node in your third, with Venus now moving back and forth in your first and 12th. Think about what you're doing and why you do anything you do, and how you might communicate something differently, in a nutshell. So a very complicated summer, but leading to many breakthroughs, I would say, in what you see as possible. Finishing out that period, then the sun goes on into, as it does every year, into Virgo, September, October period, and then it's a Libra. And then as it goes into Libra, we're heading into a really complicated time, because financially the world is going to go through great turmoil during this period. As the sun, your ruler, moves into Libra, its sign of debilitation, activates the eclipses. And we have an eclipse in October, as I mentioned, just to remind you here, October 14th, just before the sun goes in. And then, so that's at the very end of Virgo. So then the sun moves into Libra in debilitation. Your ruler is in its weakest position. That's the same every year from mid-October to mid-November. Nothing new there. But what is new is that then Venus has gone into Virgo, conjoins the South Node after that eclipse, and triggers this financial meltdown, I would say. Now, because it's doing that in your second sign while the sun is in your third, debilitated, after Venus has done all of that back and forth during the summer, it's really important that you're mindful of your finances, I would say, Leo, because, yes, I'm saying there's a lot of opportunity out there for you, and keep an open mind, but keep a steady income stream coming in and savings, and put all of that away for this potential crash. And keep an open mind about that too, because if you have loads of money in the bank and all of a sudden there's a meltdown financially, that could alter your finances in a big way. And that's really the big theme from the end of the year into the new year 2024, where you're really having to completely change your financial situation. like completely. And I don't even know what that could look like for you, Leo, but I know that there will be changes financially. So just as long as you're mindful of that throughout the year, that you can put like your nest egg away, or you can like diversify, or whatever they say in the any kind of economic models. I don't know. I have no idea because I'm not an economist, but somehow maybe just not have all your eggs in one basket. Let me put it that way. Because the South Node in the second sign obviously is clearly showing that with this eclipse now, and all of that is showing changes that happen to happen. And, it might reduce your bank balance. Now, you might be reducing your bank balance because of all of these new opportunities that are coming along with all your travel plans and studies and all of these things. That's a positive way to spend your money, of course. Any kind of spending your money on spiritual pursuits or any kind of learning is positive with Ketu in the second sign. As Rahu then moves into your eighth sign, the other potential for that is, of course, inheritance. But one of the downsides about inheritance with Rahu in the eighth sign from November is the potential for, you get something, but then you have to pay this price for it. It's like, I'll give you this, but then you have to do this for me. Those kinds of things might become an issue with Rahu in the eighth house. So Sun goes into Scorpio then in mid-November to mid-December. This is the whole period where it's getting really complicated because Sun then in Scorpio is aspected by Saturn. And I'm going to talk about Saturn now as well, because it's probably one of the more important transits for you, Leo, in 23. But Saturn aspecting the Sun, your ruler in Scorpio, really focusing on changes that are happening in your home life, which are probably happening, if not already happened at this point, because of Saturn's transit. But if they haven't happened at this point, I think there will be some major adjustments going on in November, December. Sagittarius in December, January, and so on. I won't get into 2024. So let's get to Saturn now. First of all, it's going into your seventh house in January and for the year and for the next few years. In Aquarius, in your seventh house, aspecting your sign, as well as your ninth sign, where I said all of the action is taking place, all of the changes in your travel plans or study opportunities, all of that coming your way, but also changes that are happening in your home life because of Saturn's aspect to your fourth sign and how it impacts you personally because it aspects you. Saturn looks at you from opposite. So obviously there's some changes going on in your relationship that will impact changes in your home life and what you believe is possible, in other words. And though I'm saying it's really important to keep an open mind about what you believe is impossible moving forward, keep an open mind, look out for opportunities, be very mindful of your partner while all of this is happening. So for you, Leo, I would say be really mindful of other people and especially a partner. If there's a partner there, if you're married or in a relationship in any way, engage with other people. Be really mindful of how you engage with other people. And because you're going through so many changes in what you see as possible and the potentials are great, it means that you have to be really mindful of how it impacts other people. Because Saturn in the seventh is asking you to be really responsible. If you're not being responsible with other people, that will impact you negatively and you will feel that negatively, and that will impact your self in a negative way. Its aspect on your fourth house, you might feel that in a very negative way. You might feel sad about that, for example, if you've impacted other people in a negative way. Having said that, I don't think Saturn in Aquarius with its aspect on Aries is going to let you get out of hand, as well as its aspect on your sign. I do think that it's going to keep you in check, and maybe that means your partner themselves will be the one that stops you from going overboard and making too many changes. So that could be a positive way of looking at that. That's just a positive spin. You'll see here that the fourth house is activated both by Saturn and Jupiter up to April. So home life, there's a great potential here for you, Leo, that there are positive changes, potentials here in your fourth house, in your home, whether that's you in your current home or a new home, could be new home, could be renovating or improving your home. Up until April, there's a great potential here. After April, when Jupiter moves out of its influence here, you're just then having to look at Saturn and getting on with it and working on it, making the changes that are necessary in your home life, in your personal life, in your relationship, and all of that will impact what you believe is possible. Again, ninth house. And after that, though, ninth and first house are both impacted. And this is where I think it's more positive ultimately, because Saturn and Jupiter both influence your first house and your ninth house. So these are, like, you might say, the lucky places. Like, this is very much about good luck, good fortune, working towards that as well, making good luck, good fortune. And what I mean by that more is that you look for opportunity, you keep an open mind. And I'm repeating that over and over, but it's such an important point to make for you, Leo, in 2023, that you keep an open mind and look out for opportunities. Finally, then the nodes are, like I said, shaking it up in what you believe is possible anyway, but then moving into those financial houses by the end of the year. So think about, grabbing opportunities as they come, but putting that nest egg away. And again, thinking about beyond finances, what's important to you. I would say ultimately what the nodes are going to shake up moving forward from the end of the year is asking you, what is it that's important to you in the first place? And the south node in the second sign, though it can practically show you, spending the nest egg that you have, or it's some way altered. Like, it could be, for example, it could be that you change your portfolio, if that's what they call it. It's like you take your money out of certain bonds and you put it into something else, into crypto or whatever. I don't know. If you are investing, though, I would say in 2023, be highly aware of a potential crash by October, November. And maybe that's what this is showing in your chart, that this crash is impacting you very personally in your savings. So that's something to be mindful of. So in that case, think about, support from other people is another main theme going forward, with Rahu then moving into your eighth. And again, whether that's inheritance or subsidies or grants or loans or any of things like that, it could be that kind of territory you're talking about. Again, thinking about your partner's wealth, maybe that they increase their wealth as well. Maybe it's more that you're focusing on your partner's wealth than your own. This is another possibility from the end of the year. So Leo, I hope that's been of help. As always, I wish you the very best for the year ahead now. And moving on to the next sign, and that is Virgo. Hello, Virgo. This is for Virgo rising and our moon sign for 2023. So Virgo, we're going to go into Mercury's transits, its retrogrades, as it does every year. And as it does this year, it bookmarks the year with the retrograde in Sagittarius beginning and ending the year. This is your fourth house, so home. And this therefore shows the potential for changes in your home, of course, a review of what that is or where that is even. But at very least, something around the home. And of course, every time Mercury goes retrograde, it impacts you personally and your career, your objectives in terms of your work life, and your direction in life in general. Every time it does so, you start looking at that more closely and thinking about that. It's part and parcel of what it means to be Virgo, to constantly question what you're doing in life. That's Mercury retrograde. So as it retrogrades in Sagittarius, again, like more home, then it later on in the year retrogrades in April, May in your eighth sign, joint finances, resources that are held jointly with other people, or intimacy with others, your partner's money, all of that, eighth sign, as well as then another retrograde in August, September, and that is in your 12th sign, Leo, which is perhaps a bit more confusing and not as clear as the other ones. Even Aries, though, the 8th sign might not be that clear in April, May. So April, May time, August, September time, these might be a bit more confusing. And the beginning and end of the year in Sagittarius might be more clear, if you could say that at all about Mercury retrograde. But keeping an open mind about all of these things, and because of these areas of your life being impacted, the 4th, 8th, and 12th houses, these are what are called the moksha houses, the liberation places. So it's like the release that you're looking for. And maybe you're looking for a release in 23. Maybe you're looking for a way out, but you might not be able to see that way out initially, is what I'm saying. Especially in the April, May, August, September retrogrades. This again might not be very clear to you what you need to do to get out of a situation, maybe. But you're looking for that release again, always with these moksha, these houses that represent liberation ultimately. Mercury and liberation, especially that August, September timeframe with the retrograde in Leo, It's a highly complicated time because of what's going on with Venus as well at that time, retrograding from Leo back to Cancer. There's a lot of things to sort of surrender and negotiate and to give up even at this time. And maybe it's about giving up thinking about things a certain way, or thinking about things can work out a certain way, and being just open-minded, by that summer period, August, September especially, and being open to the changes that are ahead, because there are lots of changes ahead. And so you don't need to worry about that. There are always changes around the corner if you ever think that things are not very clear right now. So again, going back to the beginning of the year, it's starting out with a Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius from the very tail end of 22 to 18th of January. It's retrograde, but then it therefore stays in Sagittarius, your fourth house, the home, until it's February 7th. So January is very much about reflecting, reviewing around home life. What is home? And working from home, perhaps. Maybe you can't travel like many people were during a Mercury retrograde over the winter period, perhaps. And so you're at home working. That could be one way it expresses itself. But there's certainly a review going on in terms of, your direction in life and home life and work life. Then it goes into Capricorn in February, and then into Aquarius very quickly, followed by Pisces very quickly by the end of March. So this is positive news in one way, because as Mercury speeds ahead, it is heralding this next retrograde period by April, May. But it does mean it doesn't stay very long at all in Pisces, which is good news because Mercury is debilitated in Pisces in its weakest sign. So from 16th of March until the 31st of March, be mindful of that weakness of Mercury, where you might feel a bit sort of overwhelmed mentally, emotionally, sort of a lot of things to think about, especially in terms of your relationship. Then it goes into Aries, March 31st to June 7th. It's going to stay there because of its retrograde from April 21st to May 15th. And in Aries, in your eighth sign, Aries is not a very clear sign for you. It's hidden, it's more hidden. It represents, hidden aspects of your life in terms of other people's motives, many times what other people value in more so. And so you're not sure about that because, so your partner, for example, if your partner has their own values, if literally that means their own net worth, their own resources and finances, that's eighth sign, but it might not be that obvious. It might be something that they value that you're having to look at and really address along with them. And so, for example, if your partner goes through, whether it's a business or personal relationship, your partner having to go through a lot of review and reassessment financially, for example, that puts a lot of sort of uncertainty on you. And that's a kind of eighth house transit. So being really mindful of that, because it's a long eighth house transit as it goes into Aries from March 31st until June 7th. So it's a long one, really all of April, May into June. You're having to deal with these kinds of uncertainties, Virgo. So just be really mindful of that, and your partners as well. They're going through something as well. So be mindful of that. Then it goes into Taurus, into your ninth sign, a more positive place for any planet. Taurus from 7th of June until the 24th of June, and then into Gemini in a much stronger position from 24th of June until July 8th. So this is a much better position in terms of its personal strengths, but also career-wise, in terms of being more clear about your direction in life now and getting on that. Then it goes into Cancer from July 8th until July 24th. Again, a very fast transit, which again is heralding this next upcoming retrograde, which I mentioned is from August 23rd until September 15th. So it means that in Leo, which it moves in on July 24th and doesn't move out until October 1st. So you've got end of July, August, September into October in the sign Leo. Again, a hidden place in your chart. So Virgo, and yet another few months of not being 100% sure about where you're going or what you're doing in life, professionally at least. So being really open-minded about what's possible at this point in terms of finances, in terms of expenditure, maybe you're reviewing that, maybe not overspending at this time because we're heading into a possible financial crash by October, November. So that can have a really big impact as well on how you might spend, but thinking a lot about spending, not just money, but also your energy and maybe reviewing and reassessing your whole approach. So then it gets quite complicated because as Mercury goes into Virgo, that's great because it's exalted in October. So that's a very positive thing for you personally. October 1st to October 18th, Mercury in Virgo. Goes into then Libra, October 18th to November 6th, as then Venus it's going into Virgo. Now, Venus going into Virgo is a bit more complicated. Not just a bit, a very complicated transit, because Venus and Virgo from November 2nd until November 29th, while Mercury, your ruler, goes into Libra October 18th, is also, like I said, a potential financial meltdown. And so for you, when you think about how this impacts you personally and your finances moving forward, as Ketu, the South Node, backs up from your second sign of finances into your first sign, there is a need to keep an open mind about, your financial life here, of course, and how this impacts you very personally and what you're doing. And what you're also doing with your money, of course, because you want to think about that. You want to think about your nest egg and your savings and all of that and how that's been impacted. Even thinking about how you maybe can diversify your income and your savings or your bank balance in some way, and think about where you can maybe put it where it's not so volatile, or not having all your eggs in one basket in a sense. So this whole period financially is complex for sure. Mercury then moves on into Scorpio in November and then finishes out the year again. This is, again, a highly complicated period, but this is more so in terms of, again, going back to that home life situation. And again, another winter, probably another kind of lockdown winter or stormy winter, where because of other transits that are going on, when we add this retrograde Mercury in Sagittarius in your fourth house and home, you might have to be working at home again, or you might not be able to go to work, or you might not be able to whatever. And this might be, again, you reviewing how you're doing anything you're doing, and especially where you're living or how you're living. And this is a retrograde from December 13th to January 2nd, 2024. So it stays therefore in Sagittarius from end of November, re-entering Scorpio briefly from December 28th until January 7th. So that's even more complex in a way because of it going in and out of Sagittarius and Scorpio and crossing over this juncture between these two signs, and thinking about how you want to do anything or communicate with anyone, especially in the home right now, thinking about travel and maybe, giving it more thought, and maybe not in this case. I mean, I wouldn't advise anyone to be traveling during this period at all, but especially as Mercury's backing up into your third sign over the winter, and again going back into your fourth sign, I would not necessarily be traveling. And I don't normally like to tell people what to do, but I'm seeing what's happening this winter, and I mentioned that in my forecast previously about Mercury retrograde in the winter of 2022-23, and we see what's happening, and it's just a nightmare. So maybe not traveling. Maybe you're stuck at home. Maybe you're thinking about things more about where you're going in life and what you're meant to be doing, and maybe that's how it pans out for you. So then looking at the transits of Saturn, Jupiter, and the nodes would be important to see how all of these bigger themes play out in your life, apart from those Mercury themes day in, day out. Saturn is moving into your sixth. Now, this is a much more positive transit than you've had of late, because Virgo, you've been dealing with Saturn in your fifth for 3 years now. And Saturn in the fifth is not the best place to put Saturn, really. It impacts relationships with, a partner, with friends, with everybody, really. And you can't really see the wood for the trees in a way with Saturn in the fifth. You can't see a future even. Fifth house is very much about thinking about your future and planning your future. And the fifth house Saturn is just not the easiest one, really, to be able to see clearly into the future. Now that it's going into your sixth in January, aspecting your eighth, 12th, and third, where a lot of these retrogrades are happening with Mercury, for example, in the 8th and 12th. This is more positive because when you have Saturn in the 6th, not only is it going to look after that space and get you to really improve your day-to-day life and get you to see actually how, well, this is how you can move forward. You got to do X, Y, and Z. That's how you got to move forward. It's also going to curtail spending and selfishness in the third house, as well as any problems in the eighth house, and maybe clear debts for you. So in fact, this can be a very positive transit. And in fact, it's seen as one of the more positive transits of Saturn in the sixth. As it does so, and for the first few months until April, end of April, Jupiter is also looking at the third house. So they both look at Scorpio, Saturn and Jupiter, third house. So it's very much about making effort now. And I think whatever effort you put in the beginning of the year until end of April, especially, will really reap the rewards. Saturn and Jupiter, when they both look at a sign, they really help you with seeing a potential, an opportunity, and to work hard at making it happen. And especially Saturn's influence on the third sign, because it's, again, placement in the sixth is one of the best places to put Saturn, because it puts it to work in places that you want it to work on. And even wanting to reduce, again, spending 12th house, problems in the eighth house, selfishness in the third house, and getting you to look at what needs to be done and just doing it. So it's a really positive thing overall. Jupiter then, after April, goes into your eighth sign. So now you have, after April, the eighth sign being influenced by both, again, Saturn and Jupiter. And this is where you can really negotiate with other people more effectively, see an opportunity maybe from help from other people, from some other source, whether it's your partner, whether it's an institution, whether it's any kind of other entity helping you through some sort of means, some financial means even, maybe through some loans or grants or dividends, I don't know, but some financial help here after April. But at the same time, it's also, and they both are also aspecting, influencing your 12th sign. So Jupiter now and Saturn both influencing your 12th sign of spending is also a better indication that you might be more clear about how to spend not just your money, but your energy and time. So ultimately, I do think that these are positive indications here, and more positive certainly than the last few years for you, Virgo, where you might not have been clear about how to go forward. And now it's like you're showing the steps that you have to take. It's just that you have to take them. That's the key thing. And that's maybe the rub here. It's a Saturn in the sixth. It's just going to get you to make some changes and to work on yourself and to improve yourself and your day-to-day life. But you got to do it. That's the key thing. So the last thing to mention then is the nodes. They are in your 8th and 12th, or 8th and 2nd, which I mentioned, that's a financial thing. And so as they're moving now into your 7th and 1st, emphasizing the other, the partner, wanting to get into a relationship even by the end of 23 into 2024, but making sure that you don't neglect yourself with Ketu, the South Node, moving through your sign, Virgo, from November. So making sure you don't neglect yourself in just jumping into the next relationship that comes along, kind of thing, and or not neglecting yourself and your needs and your partner's needs, and how you find balance between yourself and them after maybe you've gone through a lot of shakeups financially. You're looking at the relationship itself and the dynamics involved. So that's a kind of bigger theme moving forward into 2024. I'll talk more about that next year. But for now, I hope that's been of help, Virgo. As always, I wish you the very best for the year ahead. And moving on now to the next sign, and that is Libra. So Libra, for Libra rising and or moon sign, or any sign from whatever perspective you're looking at Libra, we're going to look first at Venus and its transits through the different signs. It's retrograde in the summer, an important time to look at the financial situation, of course, leading to what I think is a possible meltdown by October, November, but also for you personally, Libra, how that impacts you and your spending and your ambitions in life as well. And after that, then we'll look at the kind of the bigger themed transits of Saturn, Jupiter, and the nodes and how they're impacting you moving forward. So Libra, Venus is beginning the year in Capricorn, conjoined Pluto until January 22nd. It's doing so as Mercury retrogrades until January 18th in your third sign. So this Venus in Capricorn is your fourth sign, so it's home life. And then Mercury retrograde in your third sign, very much about communication and home life and all of that, which has gone through such a great change, of course, in the last few years, and challenge perhaps as well, with Saturn moving through here. But Saturn has moved out of here by the time Venus has moved out of here by January 22nd, and they both move into Aquarius, your fifth sign. So it really emphasizes the shift now when your ruler, Venus, moves from Capricorn into Aquarius and from your fourth to your fifth, in terms of thinking about what you want in life, thinking about what makes you happy, and thinking about your home life and how that then leads to more expressive part of you. Thinking about Saturn and actually how Saturn both rules fourth and fifth houses in your chart and how they're tied together. And that unless you feel happy and safe and secure and at home, then it's unlikely that you're going to be as expressive, which is the fifth sign. So now that Saturn's moving into your fifth, as Venus moves into your fifth, thinking about how you want to express yourself, how you express your love for another as well is important here with Saturn and Venus, but also how you express yourself generally and creatively as well. That's Venus, Saturn in Aquarius. And then soon after that, in February, from mid-February until mid-March, you have Venus, your ruler, exalted in Pisces. So this is a very helpful transit every year, of course. Having your ruler exalted is very good. It's also very good because it's conjunct Jupiter. And Jupiter, Venus together in Pisces is maybe too good, if anything, because this is your sixth house, which can also show that you're maybe creating problems for yourself by it being too good. So in other words, if you overindulge during this period from February to March, this could lead to problems in health even. So just be mindful of not overdoing it, not overindulging. Just having that one drink too many and then you just don't feel good, whatever it might be. Thinking about this as a good transit, as an enjoyable transit for sure, and enjoying your just day-to-day life, but not creating problems for yourself by overindulging. Venus then moves into Aries in March, April, mid-March to beginning of April, very quickly moves through Aries, your seventh sign, relationships, always pretty enjoyable. But this time it's been shaken up in a big way because it's not just Aries this year, it's Aries conjoined, Venus conjoined Rahu, North Node, Uranus, Jupiter later on in April. A big shake-up is due, Libra, in your relationship this year. So this is kind of like if I was to say there was a headline news to this year for you, it's relationships changing. That's also because of Saturn moving into your fifth, aspecting the seventh, but all of these planets in your seventh and Aries, including now Venus in March, April, before Jupiter by the end of April. Lots of shakeups in your relationship space and for your partner. So if you're not feeling it personally, which I imagine you are, because if your partner feels that you will, your partner will feel a lot of changes going on for them. And you have to think of them as positive changes. And especially then when Jupiter goes in to your seventh by the end of April, that's a lot more positive, which I'll get to. Then Venus moves into Taurus, which is another sweet spot in the year in general. But for Libra, of course, this is the eighth sign. So maybe again, if we say after an indulgence in February, March, now you've got April, May, where you've got this kind of potential for more enjoyment, but maybe again, indulgence. And so thinking about that as well, thinking about what the eighth sign means for you as well, right from the beginning of the year with Mars retrograde here, thinking about negotiating with other people, especially your partner, thinking about your intimacy, your emotional and physical intimacy, with your partner or with any other, thinking about the things that you have no control over or seemingly no control over, the changes that are unexpected in your life, and thinking about now how you can heal many things with Taurus and especially Venus and Taurus in April, May. Maybe something that needs to be healed, maybe something in your relationship, I would say. Then it goes into Gemini in May, very briefly in May, and then into missed something out here. So this is clearly I just missed out Cancer because it's doing it twice. It's moving in from May 30th until July 6th. And it's doing that because it's slowing down, because it's going to go back into Cancer in August. So what's happening is you have Venus move into Cancer May 30th to July 6th, then go into Leo July 6th to August 7th. But because it's retrograde from July 23rd, it backs up into Cancer August 7th and will remain there until October 1st. So therefore, Venus is going to spend a long time in Cancer, obviously, from the end of May until October. And then, go back in and out of Leo as well. So I'll just highlight this whole period here: Cancer, Leo, back to Cancer, and back to Leo. So this whole period. So let me just highlight Cancer and Leo. So this is your 10th and 11th houses, Libra. So work and what you wish to gain from work, what you earn from work also, and as well as anything else you wish to gain, any recognition or any kind of status, is what's up for review in the summer of 2023, Libra. And as you're going through all of the changes that are going on in your personal life and how you express yourself very personally with Saturn in Aquarius, opposite this, you have the transit of Venus, your ruler, in Cancer, Leo, back to Cancer, back to Leo. This back and forth between what it is you're doing and why you're doing anything, and taking a step back from it as well, and maybe thinking about your higher ambitions and what needs to change and how you express them and how you express yourself in general, I would say, this whole period. So a Venus retrograde is not that unusual in terms of it's every couple of years, but it's more unusual when it does it between signs like this, and especially Cancer and Leo, because it's a bit of a tricky juncture. And it's one of the reasons I'm mentioning this financial meltdown that's happening by the end of the year, the potential for that at least. But for you to think about how that affects your work and your earnings, I would say, Libra, because there are changes afoot. So it retrogrades from July 23rd to September 4th, just to be really mindful of that whole period, which is a complex period really because of its moving in and out of two signs. Then after all of that, after you're going through all of that big shakeup in terms of your work and your earnings and your objectives and your ambitions and all of those things, and maybe friendships as well are put to the test here as well, then it goes into Virgo, to your 12th sign. And this is the most complicated part of the whole thing, and almost like the fallout after all of that volatility all year, whether financially or energetically for you, in terms of every sphere of life, really. I think you're going to be impacted by this, Libra. But by the end of the year in November, as Virgo is where Venus enters and conjoins Ketu, the South Node, which has just entered the sign, this is where it all sort of has to be let go of. Any kind of whatever your objectives are in the long term, and in terms of jointly held finances, what you need to really kind of relinquish at this point. Maybe there's some thing that you can focus on in a positive way in terms of maybe your partner's finances. Maybe there's a spending curb that has to happen here, or maybe that you do have to spend more to gain something, or maybe that you gain something and then you have to put it out. It's like in one hand, out the other hand, right? Though this could be a financial meltdown globally, I think that for you personally, it's important to just be mindful of your energy. That is the case every time Venus moves into Virgo, this time in November. But as it does so this time, it not only moves into Virgo, it conjoins Ketu, the South Node, which has just moved into Virgo. This is in particular then a really key point and a turning point for you in terms of spending, in terms of your energy, as well as financially, in terms of just feeling like spent also potentially here. And so to be really mindful of that and not to overly spend, to focus on November in particular, I think in 2023 as a time to really slow down and pay attention and not overdo anything, I would say, Libra. By the time though, then it gets into Libra, into your own sign, 29th until Christmas Day, 25th of December, the shakeups have already happened in many ways, but we're still kind of reeling from them. So although this is potentially more personally a more empowering time, and maybe it's because of the letting go and the surrender that you were able to achieve during November, December could be that kind of empowering time for you. Then it goes into Scorpio from Christmas until the new year, which is also a more complicated time in a way. Mercury will be retrograding back into Scorpio at this time also, and then meeting with Venus, your ruler, in the second sign. So again, obviously financially, there's a lot to kind of reconsider here. Spending and earning and saving and all of these issues, and how you cooperate with other people and how you plan your life moving forward, and with another person especially, or with one particular person, your partner. is all going to kind of hinge on this latter part of the year, really in October, November, December. So Libra, let's look at the kind of bigger impacts of Saturn and its impact on different places as well as Jupiter. Saturn, like I said, moving into your fifth, so it's getting to really look at your future, but how that impacts your relationship with your partner, as well as friends and your objectives in life and your financial life is going to be key here, because Saturn will influence all of these, the 7th, 11th, and 2nd. And up until April, both Saturn and Jupiter will impact your second. So that's some more potential there for, really doing something positive with your financial life. Really, I would say actually from this whole period, from the beginning of the year to April especially, to really put a nest egg away because of that volatility I mentioned in October, November, December. So for the beginning few months of the year, I would say really put some savings away and really work on that. Then after April, then we have both the 7th and 11th being impacted by both Jupiter and Saturn. And again, relationships are key here. And again, more potential here and more positive potential because of Saturn and Jupiter both looking on. It's always good to have both of these looking on because it makes you work at something while also giving you the opportunity at something. So for you to be responsible while taking an opportunity in terms of your relationship and your friendships and your ambitions, I think there could be a great opportunity here for you after April. And then finally with the nodes. The nodes are in your 1st and 7th, which is highly complicated because the North node is really emphasizing and exaggerating and maybe distorting your relationship with your partner or their own self. Maybe there's something that they're dealing with themselves personally. But by doing that and overly focusing on them, you're potentially neglecting yourself, not seeing yourself in this. The positive thing here is that the South node moves into your 12th sign from November. And although that's a whole other ballgame in terms of financial situation, in terms of for you personally, I think that this is a more positive transit because Ketu in the 12th house is a better place to put Ketu, first of all. Rahu, it just feels more like, in alignment with what its objectives are, which is about liberation, which is about surrender and release. At the same time, Rahu moves into your 6th house, and it's important at this juncture from the end of the year into 2024 that you don't lose perspective of what seem like maybe problems on the surface level, and maybe indeed they are, like debts or problems like that, for example, but that you don't overly focus on the problems and you allow yourself some surrender and release into the 12th house in a more positive way without checking out in a negative way, checking out in terms of not wanting to deal with something. Here, I think the potential for dealing with a problem, overcoming a problem, and getting rid of a problem is a more positive expression. So Libra, I hope that's been of help. As you can see, there's a lot of changes happening in 2023. You can make them work for you in a more positive way. You need to negotiate, as is your nature, Libra. So just do what comes naturally to you and you can work your way through all of these issues. But just to be mindful of the financial situation and overspending and thinking about curbing your spending or thinking about your finances in general and your work life. And thinking about the long-term picture, I think will be important. So I hope that's been of help. And as always, I wish you the very best. And moving on to the next sign now, and that is Scorpio. So Scorpio, this is for Scorpio rising, moon sign, sun sign, whatever sign, just looking at Scorpio from whatever perspective. We'll look at Mars, first of all, and its transits, its retrograde from the beginning of the year and what it's doing at the end of the year. It's doing something funky. And then we'll look at the longer term transits of Saturn, Jupiter, and the nodes, how they're impacting your life in 2023. Mars is continuing to retrograde, has been retrograde, continues to retrograde through January 12th. So it means that it's in Taurus and would be in Taurus all of this period from November 13th, 2022 until March 2nd, 2023. So it's a long time in one sign for Mars, and it's your 7th sign. And it's not the best sign to put Mars, to be quite honest. It is not the best sign for Mars because Mars is about being bullish and relationships are about being compromising. And Mars retrograde is maybe hesitant and not as bullish outwardly, but then it's sort of like biting your lip and not saying what you want to say, and then it comes out in other distorted ways. So this is a potential for, it has been, I'm sure you've been living with the Scorpio and dealing with it, but really until it goes direct, until March, or even when it goes direct in January 12th, but until it moves out of Taurus on March 2nd, I think you're going to have to really put up with sort of annoyances and maybe having to negotiate and maybe not wanting to, and feeling in some way, frustrated in some way with another person or a situation, because Mars also rules your sixth sign where so much is happening in your life. Sixth sign is very much about how your life works or not. And because Mars is retrograde, it's showing that it's not working. And maybe there's things that really need to be reassessed or redone. And how that impacts your partner and how they impact you is going to change a lot ultimately. So this whole period, months and months of Mars in your seventh sign is challenging you, but the challenge will ultimately improve your life, is what I'm trying to say. And there are more changes to come, a lot more changes to come in 23. So be open to them, be more positive about them, I would say. When we look at after April, when Jupiter moves into Aries, into your sixth sign, lots more shakeups coming, but be open to the changes that are necessary at this point. The eclipses and all of that showing you have to change your life. There's a lot of change that has to happen in your daily life and your routines, and how that impacts other people, including and especially your partner or any other, will be a focal point, of course, but it shouldn't be the only focal point. You also need to figure out how you're going to manage your life yourself so that you can engage with other people more positively, so that you're not getting irritable or angry at others. So as I said, Mars will retrograde until January 12th. And after that point, just be patient with that itself, because as it's stationed, it's not moving and it slowly starts to move forward, but it takes its time doing so. So take your time with it. Take your time with other people as well. Don't be frustrated with other people. And if you are frustrated, just acknowledge it and don't try and bury it. Try and find a healthy outlet for it. If you can exercise cautiously, mindfully, without overdoing that either, this can be a great time to find your own power in this dynamic. Maybe a partner, another, is challenging you, and maybe you can rise to the challenge. That's another expression of this. So then Mars goes into Gemini March 2nd until May 10th, and that is a trickier transit maybe in one way as well. You've already had a touch of this in the end of 2022, October, November, mid-October to mid-November. But Mars in the 8th house is having to negotiate things that are seemingly outside of your control, but Mars likes to keep things in control. So 8th sign is sexuality, intimacy, joint finances, joint resources, joint values. So obviously, after you've dealt with the issues with your partner, then you're having to deal with these kinds of more intimate issues with your partner, and maybe more financial issues with your partner, or your partner's finances are going through a sort of process that you're having to, trying to work out your own place in that as well. 8th house is very much a hidden place or a place you try to hide, at least. You might be more mindful of it, but it certainly is something to negotiate here and to communicate as well. Communicating being the operative word with Gemini. But Mars in Gemini, Mars is not very communicative, is it? It's just, if you feel angry, it's hard to communicate when you're angry, and it's not very effective. So try and keep a sort of rational sort of approach to your joint finances, I would say, to any kind of issues that are coming up around your intimacy with your partner or any other. Mars in Gemini. Then it goes into Cancer. And then this is potentially more complicated, because now on the one hand, it's not as dire as it might seem, as maybe many make out, that Mars is debilitated in Cancer and therefore it's really not good for Scorpio. No, it's not going to feel as energetic as it likes to be, in signs like Aries or Scorpio itself, but it is your ninth sign at least. The issue here is if you're traveling and that you're not getting sort of into situations where you're dealing with other people that are likely to be feeling this as much as you are, in terms of the energy is just not there. And you could be overcompensating, and other people will certainly be overcompensating for this by trying extra hard. But then if you try extra hard, then you just get more exhausted. So think about this in May, June, not to exhaust yourself. The opposition to Pluto is just adding further complexity in terms of the engagement with other people and any kind of communications that are going on right now, any kind of dialogue you're having, whether with anyone, really, I'm going to say anyone, be mindful of the kind of power dynamics that are going on right now, really tricky ones, and don't go there, I would say. Instead, conserve your energy during May, June. Think about that in terms of maybe if you are to travel, that it's traveling for rest and recuperation, that it's traveling for some sort of more purposeful pursuits as opposed to anything else. And being open to sort of hidden dynamics that are going on in the people that you meet on the way. Let me put it that way. So a bit of a complicated time for sure in May, June. Then it goes into Leo. And although Leo is a stronger position for Mars, it's in your 10th sign. So it's more engaged in terms of action, being proactive, especially in terms of your career. The issue here is that it's opposite Saturn, especially as it initially goes in. But in August, really, it's a bit complicated because we've got a few things going on. We have Venus at this point retrograde from Leo into Cancer again, Mars moving into Leo and then opposing Saturn, Venus going back into Cancer opposing Pluto. There's a lot to work out here in terms of your personal and professional life, Scorpio. So you're going to have to work out a lot in terms of, what is it I should be doing, around my home life as well, because of Saturn, which I'll talk more about now in Aquarius. This is probably one of the most important transits for you is Saturn in Aquarius. But for now, just in terms of the Mars in Leo in June, July, August, just being mindful of the kind of tense environment that's building and how that's impacting your work life and your home life. And getting the work-life balance right as well will be important now at this time. So then looking further on into August and September, October, we are seeing Mars go into Virgo, and we're on the cusp now in a way of a really complex time into October, November, which I'll talk about now in a minute, in terms of a possible financial meltdown even, and especially because this is in your 11th sign, Mars in Virgo, where the meltdown is really being instigated. It's important to look at your earnings and the potentials here, but also the changes that are happening and moving forward, and the changes that will continue to happen from the end of the year into 2024 with the South Node moving into Virgo, the North Node moving into Pisces. So this is a kind of cuspal time now, August, September, and just to be mindful of that and to kind of think about your energy, think about earning as much as you can, I guess, at this time, but maybe thinking about different ways of earning as well. Thinking about your friendships as well and networks and people that you're connected with, and thinking about diversifying those as well, maybe, and thinking about changing how you connect with those people. But then in October, November, that's when it gets really complicated. So I'll show you all of this here. So we have it's an interesting situation because we have Mars go into Libra, is opposing Jupiter, Rahu, and Uranus, which are in your 6th sign. I'll talk more about Jupiter moving into Aries, but really it's this complicated situation of the opposition with Jupiter, Rahu, Uranus, and the conjunction with Ketu, the South Node, on the 5th of October exactly. Now, Mars historically conjunct Ketu has shown housing crash or a market crash. But I'm also going to add in a housing crash because when you think about, Mars and Cancer in the summer and this fallout here, I do think that the housing market is going to go through great challenges in 23. Now we're going to talk about housing in terms of your transits because of Saturn in a minute. But for now, just focus on this at the end of the year, this housing crash, this market crash, this whatever crash, this new financial system that has to come online to kind of reboot the whole thing. I don't know. In terms of the transit for you, because this is your 12th house and opposite all of these planets in your 6th house, where you're dealing with some issues, work issues, debts, problems with other people, wanting to kind of work these things out, but at the same time, having to let it all go. Where do you find a balance? There's not a lot of balance here when you focus on problems and that you're trying to work out, but by trying to work them out, you actually create more problems. And instead of just kind of letting it go for a while, but not overdoing that either, and then just kind of giving up. You know, a lot to kind of juggle here in the latter part of 2023. And because Mars then, as it goes into Scorpio, very strong, but combust very close to the sun, exact by the 18th of November, you might feel a bit wiped out by all of that's happened in recent months and weeks, in more immediate weeks, especially leading up to this, that you might just feel like just wiped. So it's important that you are mindful of your energy by the end of the year, in other words, and that you know, focus your energy, focus on the changes that are happening and the changes that need to happen, but don't get obsessed about them. Don't get bogged down in them. And, you know, think about what is inevitable and the changes that have to happen now as just that, you know. The issue with Mars oftentimes is that you overdo it, and that we all overdo Mars and we don't know when to quit, and we try and control things, and there we can't control everything. And so there are things here that are outside of your control and even your conscious awareness that are happening here with Mars conjunct Ketu in your 12th house. You know, it's completely outside of the realm of, you know, I can figure all of this out. You know, you can't figure it all out, but try and at least be open to what's happening now so that you can work it all out ultimately. So let's get into the bigger transits now, the bigger picture view of these Saturn, Jupiter node transits. Saturn is a big player for you in 2023. It's moving into fourth house on the 17th of January. Fourth house then aspects your sixth house, your 10th house, and your first house. So you personally are going to be really impacted in the work that you do and where it is you do it even. So it might be a change of residence, it might be a change of office, it might be a change of home, you might be changing all of the above, and that is all going to change you and how you work and how effective you work as well. So much is happening on the sixth house. And if I look at here, the sixth house being activated in a strong way, especially after April, in a more positive way, we might say that you might have some things that you're dealing with in the first few months until April and some problems you have to kind of deal with. But then after April, then you'll be able to deal with it maybe better. As long as, again, you don't blow problems out of proportion, because Jupiter moving into Aries, conjoined Rahu and Uranus with Saturn's aspect, could be that you're just overly focusing on this issue on your sixth house. And there's a need to find a balance between that and just letting it go and surrendering. That's a big theme for you, Scorpio, in 2023. It's just this surrender to all of the changes that are happening, because there's so many changes happening for you, very personally, professionally, every which way. So here we have the first house, yourself, your sense of self. And the focal point is you being impacted by both Saturn and Jupiter until April, the 21st of April, with Jupiter aspecting your sign together now with Saturn. This is a great potential impact. So there's a great potential here for you to work on yourself, to improve your health as well. And again, especially after April, then with Saturn and Jupiter both influencing your sixth house, health improvements can come along, but it could be after some problems. You know, you could realize that actually there's some real issues here. I really need to deal with them. But the knock-on effect that that will have on your work, 10th house, is more positive because Saturn and Jupiter both aspect your 10th house from April onwards the following year. So this is a great potential in terms of status as well, in terms of career. Real great potentials. But again, remember that there is a need to let go here somewhat. And by letting go, you'll get so much more out of it. Finally, then, Rahu Ketu, the nodes, are in your 6th and 12th, as I said, and it's really emphasizing and overemphasizing problems and not being able to let go of them, or overcompensating and not focusing on anything and trying to just tune out. But it shifts then by the end of the year into November and into 2024, into your 5th and 11th. So it's a lot more enjoyable, I would say. Rahu, the North Node in the 5th, can be very enjoyable and increase, you know, fun. While Ketu, the 11th sign, obviously, you know, can decrease earnings, because if you're having too much fun, obviously you're not earning as much. So that's something to be mindful of going forward, and thinking about that throughout 2023 in terms of putting that nest egg aside, perhaps, so that you don't or aren't as affected by maybe a reduction in earnings, shall we say, if you indeed are indulging in other things. But Rahu in the 5th house moving forward, I would say, is more fun. So Scorpio, as you can see, and as it is the case for many of the signs, There's a real need to look at the finances in your chart. There's a real need to look at work as well, and problems, and how you overcome problems, how well you do that, and how you might be able to alter that, change the way you approach a problem, and maybe let the problem go at sometimes where you maybe cause too many problems on top of what is already an issue. The Mars tendency, like I said, is to just not know when to quit. This is something I always say about Mars, and it's true. Every time you just don't know when to give it up, you can create more problems than you really need to, as opposed to just letting it go for some time and then doing what you can, and stepping up and having the courage to do what you can when you can. Key thing is how this is going to impact you personally is a change in your home life. Your home life is going to go through so much change in 2023, and how that impacts you is going to be an important one moving forward, because it can change the way you look at what you want from life, what you're doing in life and where you want to be in life. And that will completely change your life. And so it's a big year for you, Scorpio. I really want to emphasize that. And you can make it work for you. So I hope that's been of help. As always, I wish you the very best. And moving on now to Sagittarius. So for Sagittarius, rising, moon sign, or any sign at all, from the perspective of Sagittarius, I'm going to take a look at Jupiter's transits throughout the year, its conjunctions, its oppositions and combustions, and all of these things, as well as Saturn and the nodes. These are the key players in all our lives, really, but more especially in your life, Sagittarius. For Jupiter, it is in Pisces. It continues to move through Pisces until April 21st, and then it shifts into Aries, where it's about to really instigate another year of huge change, I'm going to say. And so we're going to all feel that very personally, globally, collectively as well. Just like the last time Rahu joined Jupiter, that time in Leo in 2016, that was a massive year of change. In 2023, Jupiter and Rahu come together in Aries. So for you, Sagittarius, this is the fifth sign. And though more positive in many ways, because whether it's your rising sign or moon sign, Jupiter does really well in the fifth sign from either, as it aspects your sign back again, and your ninth sign, Leo. The thing is that it's conjoined Rahu, and so it's going to shake things up a lot for you in terms of what you believe is possible moving into your future. And so now this is a common theme throughout the year and for all signs, the financial meltdown that's likely by the end of the year, huge volatility all year. Fifth sign is very much about that anyway. Ninth sign, in terms of your finances, if you're in any way speculating about anything, if you're investing, I would be really mindful of this, because it's highly volatile as soon as Jupiter moves into Aries. Conjoined Rahu in May, the eclipse then, April, and then May. And then, leading to, like I said, that's potential for a financial meltdown after the summer in October, November. It's important that you think about the fifth sign in more positive ways, in terms of, yes, seeing the potential for some investment for sure, and an opportunity for fun. Absolutely. Fifth sign is that too. Planning your future. Absolutely. All of those things are positive. The first few months of the year until April 21st, of course, Jupiter is continuing through Pisces, and Saturn moves into Aquarius, no longer aspecting. When you think about the elephant in the room, is that there's this thing looming. It's like if I say that the financial situation in 23 is so extreme that it's like almost obvious that this is too good to be true. Let me put it that way. That leads to a sort of meltdown by the end of the year. If you're aware of that you have a situation that seems too good to be true, I'm not saying that you shouldn't go for it. I'm saying just to be open-minded about it and to really investigate it. Now, thankfully, Saturn moving into Aquarius aspects Aries. So really, as soon as Jupiter moves into Aries, it's been aspected again by Saturn. You might think, oh God, again, because you've been having years of Saturn aspecting your ruler since 2020. And you think, do I need to be under the thumb of Saturn still for yet another year? Well, yes, you do. But in another way, that could be a positive thing, because if without Saturn's containment here, this could have been like really blown out of proportion, and it could be very volatile. Now, it can still be very volatile in Aries with Jupiter, Rahu, Uranus, all in Aries. But Saturn aspecting, looking on, containing it, focusing you, could really be a great opportunity for you to take some opportunity that comes your way, whether financial or not, and be really focused on it, but also very responsible and diligent and, consistent as well, and really taking the long view and being very objective about it, I would say. So the same applies though for any Sagittarians who have children, because there's a lot of shakeups that are going on in your children's lives. As children grow, they do anyway. Like maybe this is a huge growth spurt, for example. But in terms of growth in other ways for your children and anything that you're thinking about in terms of the future, being a huge growth spurt, like it's unpredictable growth. It's like you thought this was going to happen and then this happens, or you thought they were going to behave this way and this happens. You put your money into this and this happens. It's like something unusual going on. Now, this could impact as well your travel plans and your just sense of hope for the future in general, with the fifth, the ninth, and first houses being really activated in this way. And Saturn's dual aspect onto your ninth sign along with Jupiter after April, there is a great potential here for travel for sure with Saturn in your third. I'll talk more about that in a minute now, but basically that's more so to after April because of Jupiter's transit. Jupiter in the fifth house aspecting your ninth sign is a great potential along with Saturn to really make some dreams come true, even I would say even to that point. When you have both Jupiter and Saturn looking at a sign, it's a lot more positive. And I'm going to say that in the sense, despite or maybe in spite of the financial situation in the world, that, you're kind of taking some chance here. You're wanting to experience something, whether it's travel or whether it's study, or you're wanting to think about some things more in a higher minded way, thinking about things in other ways, thinking more potential, more possibility, opportunity. It's just a lot more positive for you in 2023. Again, if you're diligent, if you're consistent, if you're focused, if you're objective about things with Saturn. Now, speaking of Saturn, like I said, is moving into your third. So its transit into your third is a better position than it has been of late in your second since, January 2020. For 3 years now, Saturn's been impacting your finances and family life in, a challenging way in many ways, I am sure. But now that it's moving into your third in a very strong position in Aquarius, aspecting your fifth, you're having to really think about how you're communicating. Again, whether it's with children or whether it's communicating something that you would love to do in the future, whatever it might be, and however that impacts you, it's going to ask you to really focus on it, be really responsible in how you communicate with Saturn in the third. And then as it aspects your ninth house, and again after April, as Jupiter does there too, you're really thinking about, well, how do I communicate even myself, my own, with my own self around what I believe to be true? Because the ninth sign is about beliefs, but your beliefs are shaped by what you day in, day out think and communicate to other people and to yourself. It's like that voice in your head. So these transits are going to really get you to look at these things and to think about what you believe is possible and what you believe to be true. So these are important transits. So let's go back to Jupiter though for a minute. It's in Pisces, as I said, until April 21st. And then it conjoins Venus on March 2nd. This is one of the sweet spots in the year, but in a way it's almost too sweet. It's like you're having like a sugar high. This March period into April, it's almost like too much of a good thing, I would say. Literally like a sugar high, so be mindful of that. Any kind of indulgence at all is something to be mindful of. That's the maybe negative side of this. But the positive side of it is that you're seeing an exalted Venus with your ruler Jupiter in Pisces, your fourth house. Very enjoyable, very happy times are potential here. And almost in a way, I think this almost like expresses itself as a sort of, when we kind of all get a sense of something coming down the pipe, it's like we know that something is going to happen. Something like, and I'm referring to maybe a financial meltdown. And it's almost like we know that it's in the zeitgeist somewhere. So it's there. And it's almost like when we have an enjoyable time coming up and we feel that what's coming next, it's almost like we overdo it. So I would say that just be mindful of that you're not checking out in some way, just kind of indulging something because on some level you know that there's some financial issue coming down the line, that you are still mindful of. The other thing to be mindful of is that Jupiter is in combustion in April as well. The sun moves in, of course, into Pisces, into then Aries by the middle of April. So Jupiter, as it finishes out its transit in Pisces, is combust. So as good as all of that could be, and the indulgences of March, April could feel like a bit like I'm a bit spent after that. And that could literally be the case as well in terms of spending. So just be mindful of that. Again, just be mindful of too much of a good thing. As then Jupiter moves into Aries, April 21st, it conjoins Rahu on May 27th, exactly. This is using the mean node. Now, this is a time to be mindful of because it really shakes things up in the world in a big way. And for you personally, it really shakes up what you see in your future. And that's not such a bad thing. If you just, again, stay open to potential and possibility instead of, focusing on what you thought should be, perhaps, and seeing the potential of what could be and taking a step back at the same time. All of that related to Saturn, Jupiter, Rahu, all of that is important so that you can really plan around this as much as possible and make this really work for you. The full potential here. So Jupiter is retrograde as it does every year, and it's always one to be mindful of personally, of course. Retrogrades from September 4th until December 31st. And so it's this period, though, as Jupiter is retrograde in Aries, your fifth sign, that we're likely to see this kind of meltdown in the financial system. I don't know if it's a stock market crash, a housing crash, or both, or whatever is going on, or some new currency introduced, or crypto or digital currencies, something that's going to happen that's going to really shake things up in a big way. So in terms of that, as all that's happening on sort of the other side of the zodiac in a way, as you're then looking at what you want to do, and Jupiter is retrograding there, it's really getting to really think about your future. Because as all of this is happening, as all of this potential meltdown is happening, that's obviously going to shape and shift the way you plan the future. And so think about that during the latter part of 2023 from September onwards. Getting back to Saturn, it's moving into your third house, as I mentioned, a much more positive place to put Saturn. It's better placed in the third sign, basically. The malefics, so-called malefics, the cruel planets, are better placed in the third sign because it's more about, objectively taking a step back and saying, okay, I just need to do this and I'm going to get on with it. So Saturn in the third is better at helping you just get on with something and making effort. And it's very much about making the effort. You can't really have a Saturn in the third and not make the effort and expect things to happen for you. You really do have to put in the effort, but when you do, then you get the results. And so again, in relation to its aspect to your fifth and ninth, and also into your 12th, thinking about your speculating in any way kind of financially or travel plans, ninth and 12th, putting effort in is going to have a lot of rewards. Not making any effort and not communicating when you need to be with that person you need to be communicating with is not going to give you the results you want. And you're going to kind of waste an opportunity here, really. So I would say make an effort with other people, with communicating more effectively with others in general, and being more objective and responsible, thinking about the bigger picture, thinking about the higher minded things, and thinking about more meaningful pursuits in your life. Along with travel and maybe study plans or anything like that, but just generally thinking about things in more meaningful ways. And that sense of meaning and purpose and opportunity then can lead to, well, let's face it, if you feel like it's more of an opportunity and it is more meaningful to you, you are going to make the effort, right? That's what Saturn in the third is suggesting. So that's all more positive. Just be mindful of that. It could challenge you, though, to step up, to kind of make an effort. And maybe somebody might challenge you to do that also. Third house is very much about engaging with other people. And maybe, something's not working there. Maybe it's a sibling. Maybe it's a neighbor you're having to engage with who you don't want to, or a sibling, a problem with a sibling you're not wanting to address. But do address it because it will pay off in the end. Then Jupiter, as I said, it's moving in April. And so before it moves, though, it means that you can see here I've highlighted the 12th sign. So it means that Saturn and Jupiter both influence your 12th sign until April 21st. So this is, potentially more positive when you have both Saturn and Jupiter influence a key area. The 12th sign is very much about spending. So Saturn can really kind of curb that, which is potentially good. So that's another good reason why Saturn is in the third is well placed, aspecting your 12th sign. Jupiter, though, is aspecting your 12th, and that could increase spending. So when you have both going on at the same time, of course, that kind of balances it out. So I'd say that's ultimately more positive. But then after April, what you have here is a position where Jupiter moves into your fifth, and then it will aspect the ninth. But so will Saturn, opposite the ninth and the third. So ninth house has been aspected by both Jupiter and Saturn. And then the fifth house is aspected by Saturn and then transited by Jupiter. So both the fifth and ninth have this double transit of Saturn and Jupiter. So that's also potentially more positive. Jupiter especially influences the fifth and ninth in a more positive way and more hopeful and optimistic way. Of this combination is more like an attentive optimism, I'm going to say. Like this is like where, okay, I am hopeful, but I'm cautiously hopeful. I'm optimistic, but cautiously optimistic. I can see the potential here, but I'm going to be diligent. I'm going to be focused and I'm going to work hard towards this goal, this dream, this whatever I have. And I'm going to then seek opportunity. I'm going to keep my eyes and ears open for opportunities because I know there are opportunities there and I know I'm going to have to work on them as soon as they come up. And so that's the best combination, Saturn and Jupiter. So ultimately, I think it's a better combination. And that can lead to more earnings, Jupiter aspecting your first, influencing you more positively, Jupiter aspecting or your 11th, and then aspecting your first. All of this is more potential and more positive. Finally, then, Rahu Ketu in your 5th and 11th houses for many months now, and for most of 23 until October into November. You have Rahu in the 5th, which is itself can be very enjoyable. And the problem here is, of course, is that it's too enjoyable and that you're enjoying yourself too much and not doing what you should be doing, which is earning money to enjoy yourself. That's the 11th house, Ketu. So in a way, there's also a need to address the dynamics here between earning and enjoying, and also friends and family and children, especially. So in thinking about your relationships with your friendships, your networks versus your children, are you spending too much time with your children and not enough with your friends? All of these things are hallmarked here in terms of the 5th, 11th. Then Rahu, Ketu go into your 4th and 10th, and they really influence and impact key areas of your life in terms of your home life and work life. And of course, Rahu really emphasizes home life and not maybe, but most probably a change in your home moving forward into 2024. But then Ketu also then changes your work life as you then make changes in your home life. And even if you don't move home or change anything in your career, there's a change in getting the work-life balance right. That's what I would say about those two. But that's more into the end of the year, into the new year, 2024. Until then, the focus is really still on enjoying yourself, but also, thinking of new ways to enjoy yourself, thinking of ways to plan your future in more inventive ways and being open-minded to unexpected events in the year. There's definitely a lot of unexpected things happening in 2023, but to see them for yourself, Sagittarius, as more positive and hopeful and be more optimistic. And when you do that, you're just going to be more open to the opportunities and grab them when they come. And then, when you keep your eyes and ears open, they present themselves and then you go for it, right? If you don't, and depending on what cycle you're in, of course, as well, personally, if you're in a Jupiter cycle, of course, you're just going to be more able to connect in with that. But even if you're not, I mean, just keep your eyes and ears open and you'll be able to see more potential and opportunity and go for it when it comes, because it is coming. There definitely is great potential here in 23 for you. So I hope that's been of help. As always, I wish you the very best for the year ahead. And moving on now to Capricorn. So Capricorn, this is a forecast for Capricorn, rising, moon sign, sun sign, whatever sign, from whatever perspective, look at Capricorn and see how this is impacting the sign, this area of your life. The first thing to know, of course, is that Capricorn is ruled by Saturn, and Saturn is moving out of Capricorn into Aquarius. So that's a big change that's happening for you. And, this is a key change that's happening for the world over. We're going to see a lot more progress in 2023. You personally, Capricorn, are going to see that progress. You're going to move on and have to think about the things that are sustaining you ultimately, because after 3 years of Saturn transiting your sign and looking at you intensely and what are you about, and if this is your rising sign, that could even be looking at yourself physically, like maybe even feeling having maybe aged somewhat in the last few years. I think that's something I've seen a lot over the years, where Saturn transits the rising sign, the person feels like they've aged a bit quicker than they would normally. um it's kind of like, in either way, it's like looking at yourself and what am I all about. After that, naturally, the next thing you're going to focus on is that what's important to me, what sustains me, what feeds me. Literally, I mean, that's literally going to be the case for Capricorn. You're going to have to think about food, diet, changing your diet, finances, values, things that you value beyond finances, family dynamics. You're going to be really focusing on those things with Saturn moving into your second sign. And of course, Saturn is seen as very powerful in Aquarius, but it also is going to get you to focus on it, and you can't avoid it. And if you try and avoid it, it's going to bring up some issues. And if you deal with it, it's going to make it a really positive transit for you. And I am sure, because it's so powerful for you, that you will, and that you will make this a very positive time in your life and really build some great things in your life, really important things that stay with you. Family, in terms of family, that's obvious, in terms of looking at family dynamics and, solidifying that, getting clear about what and who is important to you, your bank balance. Now, initially, it said that Saturn moving into the second sign can, reduce the bank balance initially, but that's usually only initially, until the person then figures out what's important, like truly important to them. And so this is maybe process. But for you, Capricorn, because it's your ruler, Capricorn, and because Aquarius is also ruled by Saturn, I do think that there's a potential here for really building a strong foundation financially. But if I was to place this in the context of what's happening globally in terms of a potential stock market crash or financial meltdown and major volatility all year, that's really what I'm seeing. You have to think about it in that context, in terms of what's possible in the context of a financial meltdown. So if at other times I might have said that this is a great financial period for you to really put some things together, it still is, but it's maybe just not as much as it would have been if it were not this financial crisis that we're heading into. So just kind of keep it in context, I would say, Capricorn. Otherwise, again, it's just about anything that sustains you, whether it's food, beliefs, values, resources, family, security, everything that makes you feel safe. Saturn is going to be all about you feeling safe in 2023, focusing on what makes you feel safe. So that's Saturn in Capricorn moving into Aquarius on January 17th, and it will stay there until March 29th, 2025. So it's a long time. And it's going to really get you to focus on that. Let's look also then at the more immediate time frame as it goes in. It will combust. It will be very close to the sun, exact February 16th. So this is a time to maybe just be mindful of, some of these issues maybe showing their, let me put it this way, maybe they're more challenging aspects in terms of family, finances, and all of these things. Because when Saturn is combust, it tends to challenge the more obvious significations like finances, perhaps, or families issues, but it also strengthens the inner significations, it said. So maybe that you're getting clear about what's important to you and your family. Maybe some challenge comes along, or some issue comes, and that you're now clear about what you need to do. And to do the responsible thing, of course, is always a must with Saturn anyway. So that's the combustion on February 16th. Then the retrograde happens every year, so nothing unusual. But this time, of course, it's doing it in your second sign. And so this is obviously a reevaluation, and maybe literally a reevaluation of something in terms of financially, but a reevaluation of what you value and your family and all of that. So there could be a kind of reconnecting with family as well in many ways from June into November. Maybe you're reconnecting with people, important people, people who make you feel safe, make you feel like you belong. I think one of the key things about Saturn in the second is feeling like you belong. more than anything. It's like putting down roots. And maybe thinking about building a foundation is an apt analogy for Saturn. The other thing is that Saturn in the second sign will aspect or influence the 4th, the 8th, and the 11th. These are Aries, Leo, Scorpio. These signs ruled by Mars and Sun. So they're kind of opposing nature in a way of Saturn, Mars, Sun. They're very opposing in a way. So obviously there's an opposing quality coming in 2023 as well. And that might feel like, the opposition between leaders and, people, humanitarian movements and grassroots movements that are rising up, and revolutionary stances that are taken more and more forward, a lot more progress in that. But for you personally, it's about looking at, again, what's important to you and the changes that's going to impact and maybe conflict with in a way in terms of your home life and your financial life, in terms of other finances, in terms of other people's finances, and especially your partner's finances and what they value. Because if you're like out there doing your own thing and you want to build your own wealth, for example, that will immediately conflict with or oppose your partner's values and their wealth. And so there might have to be this kind of tug of war that goes on as well, in that sphere. And then also in terms of your earnings, it's like you're going to really have to look at your money, obviously, because Saturn in the second aspects the 11th. So you're going to be looking closely at any kind of new revenue streams you could think about, to gain more money, to think about, building your wealth and all of that. But again, just be mindful of the conflict that could create with other people, and especially your partner or any partner, like financial partner, like business partner or romantic partner. So as it aspects those signs, Jupiter continues to transit through Pisces, your third sign, until April 21st. And as it does so, it also aspects the 11th sign, Scorpio. So both Saturn and Jupiter aspect Scorpio until April 21st. So that means the first few months really is a great potential for you to put in those new earning streams, right? These new gains of some kind. Now, if it's not money, it could be other things, like literally like gaining friends, connecting with some groups of people, but definitely feeling connected. There's a sense of connecting with some things and connecting the dots as well. And that's why the more friends people have and networks, usually the more opportunities they get and the more opportunity for earning that includes. So thinking about that until April. After April, then Jupiter moves into Aries, into your 4th sign. This shows more positive potential in the home front. And though it does also show big changes because it then conjoins Rahu in May, definitely like a shake-up in your home life. But with Saturn looking on and from the area of finances, I think that you're going to have to obviously think long and hard about these kind of financial commitments that you're going to have to make these changes in terms of your home life, maybe even changing your home. At the same time, because Jupiter in the 4th house is also aspected by Saturn, that's seen as a positive thing because it's a double aspect. So Jupiter and Saturn both look at the 4th house home, as well as the 8th house of joint finances. So I do think there's a few things to negotiate here, but there's a great potential for you to, after April especially, negotiate with a partner or another or any other person financially, maybe an institution even financially, to help make changes in your home, basically. At the same time, Jupiter will aspect your 10th and 12th. So there's also more potential here for career-wise in terms of changes, more positive changes in your career, and thinking about maybe spending. You might, obviously with Jupiter's aspect to your 12th, might increase spending. That's one of the things of the 12th house. And so you might need to be mindful of that, increasing spending. But if you're also looking at really building wealth, then that might not be an issue. The last thing to say is that Rahu, Ketu moving from your 4th, 10th by the end of the year is a key transit, but really it's continuing until the end of the year, till November. And that means, like I said, likely changes in your home and also career and work-life balance and all that. Really emphasizing home life more than anything, changes in the home with Rahu there. And maybe de-emphasizing or not emphasizing enough of career, that's Ketu. But then the shift in November and into 2024 is Rahu in the 3rd, Ketu in the 9th, is really looking at how you communicate your values, your ideals, what would make you happy, and maybe not relying on other people to tell you what you should think, but maybe working that out all for yourself. That's Rahu in the third house. And maybe communicating something different now that you've come from this space of change and changing what you thought was possible in your life and changing the direction your life is going in 23, leading to that kind of change of mind that happens, I think, more so in 2024, where you're really changing not just your mind, but on a deeper level, your whole belief systems of what you think is possible. And so I think it's many times that's the case anyway. As Rahu Ketu move backwards, it's first the changes that happen in your life that then instigate the changes that you think, or the change that happens in your thinking. It's not usually the other way around, or not always the other way around, where you start changing the way you think and then changes happen. Oftentimes something happens that changes in your life, fundamental thing, and then it's like you see different potential. Like moving house is one of the biggest changes you can make in your life, and that will obviously then change also potentially your career or the direction your life is taking. But just moving house, it's like you've changed your space, and all of a sudden you see new possibilities, new environments open up new opportunities and new ways of thinking. So that is kind of more into the next year, but I just wanted to kind of flag it now. So Capricorn, in the context of a global financial meltdown, apart from that, I do think that is a great potential for you here financially and making positive changes in your life, personally and professionally. As of course, Ketu, the South Node, will move out of your 10th house into your 9th, leaving that 10th house, open again for growth after maybe like a real pruning period of Ketu. So a lot more potentials for you in 2023 and onwards. Again, just keep it in context, keep it in relation to what is going on in the world around you. And I hope that's been of help. As always, I wish you the very best for the year ahead. And moving on now to Aquarius. So for Aquarius, rising, moon sign, sun sign, any sign, whatever perspective you want to look at from Aquarius, whatever Aquarius represents for you personally, Aquarius obviously is going to be one of the most impacted signs in 2023, and that is due to Saturn moving into the sign. So Aquarius is going to feel this shift more than any sign personally. If you've got Aquarius rising or moon sign, for example, you're going to feel it. That's not a bad thing because Saturn is the ruler of Aquarius, is very strong in Aquarius, and it's going to really get you to focus. Now, sometimes, of course, when we overly focus on something, we can focus negatively on it. Like, if you're focusing on something all the time, it's almost like it gets distorted in your mind, where you just kind of, if you look in the mirror long enough, for example, your features start to distort. This is important to kind of be mindful of, because if you're just overly focusing and the focus is negative, that's not necessarily a good thing. But if you focus in a more objective way, which is the potential here also, then the potential here is for you to make great progress while keeping an eye on the bigger picture. So don't lose, in other words, don't lose perspective of the bigger picture, Aquarius. Personally, this is going to be a step up from what you've been doing the last few years, because Saturn has been in your 12th sign of loss, of endings, of needing to end something, literally, possibly. So the fact that it's now moving into your sign means that you can start something new. And personally and professionally, because it aspects your 10th sign and 3rd sign, you're going to be really focusing on doing something professionally. And that is a really positive thing. As long as, again, you're not focusing on yourself negatively, this can be a great potential for you to focus on yourself professionally and build a really important professional platform for yourself. So Aquarius, that's the really positive side of Saturn in Aquarius. And globally, again, we will see a lot of progress in the world, and it'll trickle down into your experience personally as personal progress and very much professionally progressing. So that's positive. And so if you've finished something in your life in the last few years and it's kind of ended now and you're wondering what you're going to do next, this is like the next stage, and something will be shown to you. And really it's from the beginning, because Saturn moves into into Aquarius on January 17th. So, and until March 2025, it's the next few years. So you're really going to be focusing on yourself and your career and your objectives and how to go about doing what you want to do. And how that impacts other people, of course, will be important. And maybe one of the rubs of this is that if you're progressing professionally and personally, you need to be mindful of how that impacts others, because Saturn in the 1st will also impact the 7th. your relationships will be impacted, in other words. And with everybody, but also especially more particular, your significant other, if you have a significant other or any other. And because it's Leo, the seventh sign, and because we're having this dynamic now worldwide where there's this kind of resistance, this kind of conflict, this opposition to the other. In the global context, that's the leaders, opposition to leaders, current leaders and current systems and all of that. And the progress and innovation that is likely to happen in 2023. And for you personally, will also have an impact on others and on your relationships. So being very mindful of how you impact your partner and other people, I would say in general. It's not to say that you don't want to like dampen down your need to progress, because you do need to progress at this point. But you just need to be mindful of being more responsible in how you handle that with your partner, because your partner is obviously going to feel that change happening in you, and they might feel that insecurity around those issues. And that maybe even a distance that is created if you're not communicating, all the time regarding these changes that are happening. It's oftentimes the case seen where somebody does become professionally more successful, and that their personal relationships are impacted more negatively. So instead of being impacted negatively, why not think about it as like purposefully approaching it, addressing your partner's needs, while also thinking about yourself. I do think that's also the potential. I don't think anyone with Aquarius is ever just about themselves anyway. They always think about other people, and many people, not just their partner. But in your case, I do think that it's important that you do address your partner's needs and focus on yourself, while also thinking about doing the responsible thing for the other. Mentioning as well, just briefly, in terms of the combustion, because although Saturn moves into Aquarius and it's very strong, it does also move into combustion as soon as it moves into Aquarius. So Sun obviously then mid-February goes into Aquarius, also sidereal Aquarius, and then until mid-March. So we're going to have this energy of combustion as well. You're going to feel it more. So if it's your rising sign more especially, so you're going to feel this in terms of maybe even feeling burnt out. It can challenge stability as well. Thinking about your spending all the while, because this is a big theme of Saturn in Aquarius for you anyway, because it's the 12th Lord. You're having to think about your spending. You're having to think, having ended something, you're starting something new, but thinking about all the energy that you need to put into it, and what energy have you got to put into it, and is it worth it? All of these things are going to be big themes. But in terms of the combustion, just in that brief period in February, just be mindful that you might feel a bit kind of wiped out with what's going on. Anyway, but that changes very quickly. Sun moves on by March. Then the other thing to mention is the retrograde of Saturn, which is a yearly occurrence, nothing new there. But it retrogrades from June 17th to November 4th in your sign. This is the first time it retrogrades in your sign after 30 years of not being in your sign. So all of a sudden Saturn's in your sign, and then all of a sudden it's retrograding. What does that mean? It means you're having to really reassess yourself, and whatever you've put in place thus far. By June, you're going to have to then start to review and look at yourself more closely. And this might be, again, where I think it's important that you don't start negatively focusing on yourself and what isn't working. Just focus on what isn't working as something you need to change, and then make the changes that you need, that are necessary, and focus on what does work, and reevaluate all of this, of course, and letting go of whatever doesn't work in this whole period will be important, so that you can move forward by the end of the year as it stations direct, and make those changes stick, basically. So back to Saturn, just to mention its aspects. Saturn's aspects are on the 3rd, 7th, and 10th, and that's always the case from wherever it sits. But when it's in your first aspect, the engagement that you have with other people and the world around you and professionally. 3rd is how you communicate, interact with other people. 7th is your relationships. 10th house is career and your actions. So thinking about 3rd house as well, and 10th house combination is very much about thinking about how you go for what you want and what you're doing in life. And 7th house is your relationships. So thinking about all these relationships that are key and pivotal in your professional life, as well as your personal life. At the same time, you can see here that there's a dual aspect of Jupiter up until April 21st, until April moves into Aries. Therefore, Jupiter and Saturn are both influencing your 10th house of career, and that's a positive thing. That means that you have an opportunity from January to April 21st to really do something professionally that is going to be very rewarding, and an opportunity that comes along. If you work at it, you can really create a great platform of growth here that stays with you as Jupiter moves on and Saturn continues to aspect your 10th house, so you can continue to build on that platform and build something really important here in your life. After that, then Jupiter moves into your 3rd house, and by doing so, it aspects your 7th, 9th, and 11th relationships, and 9th house and 11th house, finances as well. First of all, relationships after April can improve. So that's good news, because it means that Saturn and now Jupiter both influence your 7th house and your relationships are improving. But also 3rd house, because Jupiter is in your 3rd house and Saturn aspects your 3rd house, Aries. Therefore, it's the same as, right? It means that your relationships are improving because your communication skills are improving from April 21st. On top of that, then Jupiter aspects the 9th and 11th. Now, these are really positive. When you have Jupiter in the 3rd aspecting the 9th and 11th, these are two houses it likes to deal with anyway. And the 9th house is of good fortune, good luck, 11th house of gains. This could be where you increase your wealth. And it's probably a lot to do with the kind of, professional platform that you're now building for yourself. So Aquarius, I think this is a great potential here for you to earn more and to get more good luck, which is really just good fortune based on previous karma, we might say. And so I think that this could be a really positive time for you after April. Then the nodes. Rahu's in your 3rd, Ketu in your 9th into November. So for most of the year, you're still dealing with this 3rd, 9th house. Rahu in the 3rd can, really exaggerate your point of view, which is not a bad thing, but it can often neglect, what other people think, and maybe even neglect what tradition says, and you're trying to figure it out for yourself and go it alone. And this can really alter the way you start to look at things and think about things and communicate. And the communicating thing is especially pronounced because Rahu in the 3rd now, joined by Jupiter in April, in May they come exactly together. There's an eclipse there in April, in the end of May. This whole area of your life, 3rd house, is shaking up in a big way. So it means that how you communicate and how you present yourself and express yourself is changing. And that means in every which way. So allow it to shake up, allow it to, shake you up and change the way you're thinking. And by changing the way you're thinking, it will change what you see as possible. So be open to that. Then by the end of the year, Rahu moves into the 2nd and Ketu into the 8th. And now that therefore shows from the end of the year into 2024, a change in your financial life. So there's a potential here for more change. Now it could mean that you increase your wealth. Again, Rahu is increasing, Ketu generally decreasing. So Rahu in the 2nd, increasing your wealth, your bank balance can increase. And Ketu can maybe decrease your partner's wealth, or maybe you're not relying on other people's money anymore at the 8th house, and you're just earning your own money in the 2nd house. So that's potentially very positive. But I'm going to say that we have to keep that in the context of what is at this stage, by the end of 23, likely a financial collapse. So in that case, it's important that you see this out as a necessary adjustment in your finances and in your partner's finances and in everybody's finances. And the world might seem like a bit more an insecure place in terms of financially. But I do, again, think that for you, Aquarius, this can be a great time for you to look at building your own wealth and not relying on other people, which is, again, leading you into 2024 and a much more positive situation there in terms of building your own wealth. So again, there's a theme here coming out, Aquarius, of you building wealth, of you putting something in place, a professional platform in place to make a name for yourself, to build yourself up after maybe a period of endings in your life, of finishing things that were maybe not very clear to you and what you needed to finish. And now it's clear to you what you need to do moving forward. So, Aquarius, I hope that has been of help. As always, I wish you the very best for the year ahead this time. And moving on now, finally, to Pisces. So for Pisces, rising, moon sign, sun sign, any sign, whatever the sign that you're focusing on from Pisces perspective, just like with Sagittarius, we're going to focus on Jupiter first, and then we're going to focus on Saturn and the nodes and see the key shifts, transits that are happening for you. So Pisces, you've been dealing with a lot in the last few years, really, to be honest, because Saturn has had a real close eye on your ruler Jupiter since 2020, the beginning of 2020. And you might say globally, this has been like the financial, issue we've all been dealing with, the lockdowns, the restrictions. And in many ways, the first few months of 2023 are a kind of release from that in some way, because as soon as Saturn goes into Aquarius on January 17th, it no longer aspects Jupiter and Pisces in your sign. So I think this can be kind of like a release in some way, but it's kind of a bit of a temporary release from January to April, because then when Jupiter moves into Aries, it's again aspected by Saturn. But at that stage, I don't think it's a bad thing, because what I'm going to tell you about in Aries. So first of all, I think it's a good thing in terms of the first few months of the year, and especially the March period where Venus also enters Pisces. So you have a Venus exalted and Jupiter there. This is like good times. But the potential here for good times are there for sure in March. Conjunct Venus exact by March 2nd. This is almost like too much of a good time, to be honest. It's like maybe overindulging, and being mindful of that as well. But then after that, and maybe just mention as well that Jupiter is in combustion in April. So after the March overindulgence, there might be this kind of like, being spent, being burnt out, in April. Being mindful of that also. But in April also, Jupiter moves into Aries on the 21st of April. And until May of 2024, it's a whole year. But then it conjoins Rahu and exact in May. So this is a bit more complicated, because on the one hand, first of all, it's leaving your sign and moving into your second sign, which is actually a better position. Now, whether this is your rising sign or moon sign, either or, it's actually a good position to put Jupiter in the second sign. So that's positive in terms of building wealth, building connection with family members, building a sense of security and safety around you, just feeling good about those things that make you feel safe. The thing is that's conjunct Rahu. Rahu is continuing through your second sign. So conjoined Jupiter now, your ruler in your second sign, it means that your finances and your work life is about to go through a major shakeup. Major shakeup going on in your financial life, family dynamics. Anything you do around family and finances, be really mindful of it, especially in May, as Rahu conjoins Jupiter. And be mindful of speech, mindful of food intake, all of that. Generally, Rahu in the second, you have to be mindful of food intake anyway, in terms of excess or maybe also contaminated food. Just be mindful of, make sure that your food is not, that it's good, in-date food and all of that. It's not out of date, all of that stuff. But Jupiter, Rahu in the second house of family and finances and food, the three Fs, can show great potential. But again, it could be just too much, and it's a shakeup as well. So it's like, yes, it could be more earning or more potential for saving, I should say. But it could also be, like unforeseen circumstances and issues coming up in terms of expense around that as well, because Rahu is the 12th lord for you, so it kind of complicates it somewhat. So though there might be some potential here for saving, or maybe some sort of something coming out of the blue from nowhere, it's like, be open to that. Just stay open, keep your eyes and ears open for an opportunity to increase your net worth. At the same time, like I said, there could be some hidden expense involved. And usually with Rahu, anyway, there is usually something involved, some other thing involved. Like there's a price to pay for it. So you get something, but then you have to pay this price for it. That's just something to be mindful of, I would say, throughout the year in a general way. But overall, generally, Jupiter moving into your second sign is a lot more positive. It's aspecting your 6th, 8th, and 10th signs. It's very much work related, and in terms of wealth and joint resources and all of that, and help from other people as well, whether it's financially or otherwise. So these are all more positive transits for Jupiter in terms of professionally, I would say. And maybe for the first time in a while, really, because as it goes into Aries, aspects your 10th sign where it hasn't been since 2019. And since the end of 2019, we've seen this kind of, fallout from what's happened in the world. So I do think that there's a potential here for you professionally, in other words, Pisces. With Saturn moving into your 12th sign is the next one to mention, because Saturn is moving into Aquarius on January 17th. Now, this is where, as soon as Saturn moves into your 12th sign, it aspects your seconds. And so maybe having to curtail your spending because of it impacting your finances and your savings in your second sign. And then as it aspects your Jupiter yet again, for like the fourth year in a row, it seems, then you're having to kind of curtail something, maybe. But in another way, in a more positive way, that could be a positive thing so that you don't let things get out of hand, so that you don't overspend and that you don't overdo things, you don't overindulge, or whether it's even in terms of your diet. Saturn in the 12th can be a good one to stop that. Saturn in the 12th can really help you curtail that. And its aspect to your 6th as well can help in terms of not doing the thing you probably shouldn't be doing, let's face it. And so as Jupiter also moves into your second sign, aspecting your 6th, both Saturn and Jupiter both aspect your 6th, and so can really improve your life ultimately. When you have this dual aspect of Jupiter and Saturn, making improvements in your life, not overdoing things, not overspending, not overeating, not over whatever, and making some changes. Until then, until April, that is, Jupiter remains in your sign though, and that's something to really take full advantage of now, because as soon as Saturn moves out of Capricorn, it no longer aspects Jupiter. So from January to April, so really make the most of that, I would say. But as I said, they both aspect the 6th sign, and then they both influence the second sign. And these are two very much about work signs in many ways, 2nd and 6th. And then also Jupiter, as it moves into Aries, influences your 10th sign solely. So what it's saying really more than anything is that there's a great potential for you to kind of find more balance in your financial life while finding more opportunity, or maybe opportunity after many years of not having opportunity in your career. So that all sounds really good, right? And it is. I do think that's a great potential here for you, Pisces, that you haven't had in a few years. So you really should make the most of it. And I do need to kind of put a caveat on all of this, because in the context of what's happening worldwide, because of the financial situation, I do think that we're heading into a real dire situation economically, and maybe even a financial crash by the end of 2023. And so you have to take that into context, and that if you are building wealth, which I do think you have the potential to do in 23, I think you also need to place that in context of a financial meltdown. So think about that, do with what you will, but make sure that you do put a nest egg aside, is what I'm saying. And again, think about Saturn moving into your 12th house as an ending phase of finishing something up, but also finishing maybe overly doing something, overly spending on something, and thinking about your finances in a more responsible, diligent way, I would say. Finally, then the nose, because this is a key shift by the end of the year, and also financially throughout the year, because for the last few months and until the end of the year, until end of October into November, Rahu, Ketu, the nose, are in your 2nd and 8th sign. It's really obviously emphasizing finances and shaking them up and changing them forevermore. Rahu in the 2nd can show a big shakeup in your finances in terms of, maybe having to rely on your own finances, your own resources, and not being able to rely on other people's. That's 8th house Ketu. But it also could show you, increasing your own wealth and your own values and what's important to you, and saying what's important to you as well. Now that Jupiter's joining Rahu in Aries, your 2nd sign, that could even just increase all the more. So you could really work now on having figured out what's important to you and realizing that you are resourceful, that you can build your own wealth. Jupiter joining it can really build more. At the end of the year, then, Rahu moves into your sign into November, and Ketu into your 7th sign. So then it's like, now I figured out what's important to me. And now actually I realize I can build my own wealth. I can build my own value set. I can build whatever I want to have around me, just me. Rahu moving to your 1st house would really focus you on you then. And like, who am I anyway? What am I all about? What am I here to do? What am I doing? What maybe I need to change it up a bit. Maybe I need to change myself a bit. Not just a bit, maybe a lot. That's Rahu in the first house from the end of 23 into 2024. At the same time, it's important to not be neglectful of others and to express Ketu in the seventh in a more, I would say, responsible way, but also in a more spiritual way, which I mean to say to deepen your relationships with other people as opposed to neglecting other people who you don't feel are a right fit anymore. Because one of the things when Rahu moves into your first and Ketu into your seventh is that you might be really so focused on yourself and your own development that you forget about what other people are doing or any other people in your life, or maybe even rejecting them, if not rejecting, at least neglecting them somewhat. So be mindful of that. The dynamics are going to shift enormously by the end of the year for you after you've figured it all out in terms of what's important to you, what you value, and then the changes that are going to happen to you personally moving forward into 2024. So a lot of opportunity, Pisces, for you, a lot of things to stay open to be mindful of, and growing something in your life now that can give you a steady base moving forward in a very volatile year otherwise globally. I think it's important that you do emphasize that and focus on it. And of course, it depends on what cycle you're in, the planetary cycle you're in, and what emphasis that you're placing on whatever area of your life. But these are the key things to look at, and especially with Jupiter moving forward. I hope that's been of help. As always, I wish you the very best for the year ahead. And until next time.